Throne Liberty can feel really overwhelming, especially if you're just starting out. So I thought, let's do a complete beginner guide, but one that teaches you literally everything. You starting the game right now with zero knowledge, no worries. By the end of this guide, you will be confident and know exactly what's going on, how the combat system works, the best ways to progress your character, how every single upgrading system works. I will even break down every single stat in the game, and the list just goes on. If something didn't get answered in this guide or is still unclear, feel free to ask me in the comments or just catch me live on Twitch. I'm always happy to help you guys out. But if you're only looking for a specific topic, make sure to use the timestamps down below. Otherwise, throw me on your second screen and let's go. Okay, so you might be a completely new player or maybe a returning one. Whatsoever, this is the perfect time to come back to the game. Because we're getting Hyperboost, which is basically a service where your character gets boosted in a really short time. So you can enjoy all the new content without farming for weeks or months just to catch up. Now, important here is that this service is not only for newly created characters. If you're a returning player, you can keep playing with your old character. You can still use this boosting service and everything that comes with it. But also important here, there will be new fresh start servers you can't transfer to. So everyone who wants to play on these servers has to create a new character. That's why I would highly suggest you, if you haven't played much since tier 2, so when the big Talandra update dropped, and you don't really have friends you want to stick with, then just start a new character on the Hyperboost servers. Everyone there will be on the same level as you, and you all start again from the beginning. You are all on the same level. But it's of course the first decision that you will have to make. Do you keep your old character or do you start a new one? So when you create your character, the Hyperboost servers should be always labeled. Okay, so you selected a server and created a character. Now, after you've played through the tutorial and given your character a beautiful name, you'll have to choose 2 weapons. And I think that's the perfect time to talk about some basics. So you have to choose 2 weapons. These 2 weapons will define your class. But the important part is you can change your weapons and with that your class at any time. Each weapon gives you a set of active and passive abilities that you can choose from. In total, you have 24 active abilities from which you can choose 12. Then you have 14 passives where you can choose 8. And finally, each weapon has its own block skill where you can choose 1. Now you can simply drag and drop them into your skill bar and then you can use them. At the beginning, of course, you don't have so many options, but as you level up, you'll unlock more and more abilities. Now these are your base skills. As soon as you're level 15, you're also unlocking the skill specialization system. You have a second tab here on the top, which is called skill specialization. This system allows you to modify all your abilities. This can be a slight damage improvement, giving an ability a new effect, or even completely changing how an ability works. As you level up, you will keep getting more and more points that you can spend in this system. Now the really important part, you can always change your weapons, your skills, and your skill specializations for free. So please use this while leveling. Try on different weapon combinations, different specializations, and just get a feel for how those weapons play. You can't really make mistakes in the leveling phase, but once you are level 55, you want to focus on one weapon combination, and for this you need to test things. Of course, later on you can play more classes, but if you want to make good progress at level 55, you will want to stick to one main class. So use the leveling phase to experiment. Progress on your weapons or whatsoever in the leveling phase really doesn't matter. And if you have no idea what to play and you just want some inspiration, I've made a list here with some of the most played meta classes currently in PvP and PvE. Of course, the meta might shift a bit now with Orb being released, but that's probably not going to change things completely, and these classes will be still strong. Okay, so we understood the class system. Now there's one question that new players always ask at the beginning. Which weapon should I have in my main hand? And for this we just need to understand the basics of the combat system. So yes, there is weapon swapping in the game, but there's almost no reason to swap weapons manually because the game does it for you automatically. For the most part, it really doesn't matter what is in your main hand and what is in your secondary hand. Of course, there are a few small exceptions to it, but at the start, it doesn't matter at all. For example, here I've got a staff and a dagger equipped, and I have my dagger in my main hand, right? Now it's important to understand I have no disadvantage when I use staff abilities. My character just automatically swaps weapons, and that's it. All the passives you chose, it doesn't matter if they are staff passives or dagger passives, they are all always active. So again, it really doesn't matter which weapon you have in your main hand or your secondary hand. For most classes, the main hand is only important for auto attacks. So right now I'm on my daggers, which means I can't hit from range, right? But if I switch to my staff, I can auto attack from range. So in general, if you have a melee weapon and a ranged weapon, just stick on the ranged weapon at the beginning and you're doing everything correct. And that's it. That might change for some classes in certain cases, but for now, it's really not a big deal. And then you have also chosen one of the 2 block skills from your weapons, right? So for blocking, you just need to know that by default, your block is always on Q. That's why people often call it the Q block. If you use it while standing still, you're doing a stand block, and if you use it while moving, you're doing a movement block. It works kinda like dodge rolls in other games. It's basically an iframe, so you can block all incoming damage during the animation. But it's especially used for blocking what are called fury attacks or wrath attacks. You were introduced to those right at the start of the game. Those pink circular attacks from monsters are fury attacks. You always want to block those with your Q block, whether it's a stand block or a roll block. Both works here. In the late game, you will also see those diamond attacks from monsters. Those you have to block with the movement block. So you have to be in movement while you use your block. But honestly, that's not too important for the beginning. For now, just try to get a feeling for it during the leveling phase. So it's going to be really important later on. So I definitely suggest you setting up a good keybind for it. The earlier you do that, the faster you're getting used to it. Personally, I think Q is not the best option, especially if you don't have an MMO mouse. For example, I don't have it on Q anymore. I put it on my mouse button. And for me, that feels just really awesome. Just find a key that feels natural to you, something that you can always press instantly. Okay, that's enough for the first basics. Now finally your leveling journey begins, you finish all the tutorial stuff on the island, and then the first question everyone asks is, what's the fastest way to level your character to 55? And that's actually super easy, you just follow the main story quest and the new growth missions, which belong to the new Hyperboost service. But in the leveling phase, those growth missions will mostly just tell you to do the main story quest. So yeah, you basically just have to do the main story quest to get your character to level 55. If you press escape and click on the Codex, you will see 2 things. The Adventure Codex, which is simply the main story quest, and the Exploration Codex, which are your side quests. For the main story quest, you don't have to do anything special. It will always pop up on the right side of your screen. It's always shown with this purple quest text and purple markers. And if you're not sure where to go, just press this little icon here that says check world map location. It will directly show you where you need to go on the map. If you just follow the MSQ, you will level up really fast. They also updated the rewards for the MSQ, so you will already get a bunch of good gear while leveling. Now sometimes it can happen that you need a little bit more experience before you unlock the next part of the MSQ. In that case, you can just do some side quests. The way those work is simple. Whenever you're in an area, on the right side below the main story quest, you will see all the available side story quests. They are always shown in blue. Just press on the little star here and then it appears in your quest log and it shows you on the map exactly where to go. And so that's basically what you do until you reach level 55. Just follow the MSQ if you don't care about rushing to 55. You can also just enjoy the side quests along the way. Some of them are actually pretty good. You will also run into some leveling dungeons while progressing. If you want to do them, go ahead, but there's no real reason to if your goal is just fast leveling. Now, when people level in Throne for the first time, it often seems like they are scared to do something wrong. Like maybe you're worried about leveling the wrong abilities or upgrading the wrong items or whatever. Let me tell you something, you cannot make mistakes in the leveling phase. It's just not possible. The resources you get while leveling are so irrelevant. It's just pretty much whatever. Just try out whatever you want. You won't fall behind. Like I mentioned before, test out different weapons, test out different skills. Do whatever you want. It's not a big deal. Trust me. And don't worry, I will explain the whole upgrading system for armor, skills and everything else later in detail. At the start it's just way too confusing, so for now just interact with the systems a bit and I will teach you later how it all works properly. Another thing that I often see with new players during the level phase is that they focus too much on trying to get the perfect gear or the best items for their leveling build. But honestly guys, it really doesn't matter what gear you're using. You can get to level 55 35 even with a green weapon. Of course, it's easier if you have better gear, but don't stress too much about it. Just use whatever drops or whatever items you get. If you want to spend more time farming better gear in the leveling phase, that's totally fine, it's up to you. But at the end of the MSQ, you will get really good gear, which will replace all your current gear, and you will get there very quickly. Another common misconception, especially early on, is about attributes in TNL. We will go into more detail later when I explain every stat in the game. But for now, you just need to know this. Every weapon scales of every attribute. So your greatsword, for example, doesn't just scale with strength. It also scales with dexterity, wisdom, perception, and fortitude. Every weapon scales the same way. So for example, in PvE, almost every melee DPS will stack as much wisdom as possible. Of course, there are differences between the attributes, but for now, the important thing to understand is every stat point is good for you. It doesn't matter what class you are playing. Now, while you are leveling, let's talk about some of the other basics of the game. I think one thing that is always good to understand early is that there are two main currencies. You have Sollant and you have Lucent. And now you probably know that the game is kinda pay to win, but it's actually not that bad. And even as a free-to-play player, you can still progress really well and stay relevant. But for this, you need to understand how both of these currencies work. Now, Sollant is your basic currency. You use it to buy stuff from NPCs, you use it for upgrading your weapons, skills, or whatever. It's just your classical gold in MMORPGs. And they are really good and easy ways to farm a lot of Sollant in the game. So if something costs Sollant, you more or less don't care and just pay it. Of course, sometimes you will run out of Sollant, but it's not a big deal, you can just farm it again super easily. The second currency is called Lucent, and this is your premium currency, which of course you can simply buy with real money. And this currency is used to buy everything in the special shop, and additionally, it's used for all player trading in the auction house, which of course makes it kind of pay to win. But let me explain how it works. First, let's have a look on the special shop. With Lucent, you can buy here all kinds of different stuff like skins, server transfers, battle passes, and so on. Nothing special here, something you see in pretty much every MMORPG. And then you have the auction house, where you simply trade with other players also using Lucent. So for example, you have an item that you want to sell on the auction house. Another player has to pay with Lucent to buy it from you. That means you can actually earn the premium currency Lucent by selling stuff on the auction house, even as a free-to-play player. And then with your profit, you can buy other things in the auction house, or you can spend it on skins or battle passes in the special shop. So yes, the game is 100% pay to win, but the cool thing is that you can actually make a lot of Lucent yourself, and you can also buy all premium features with it. So you literally have to spend $0 and still have all the premium features always active. Of course, all of us would love to have a non-pay-to-win game, but let's be real, that will probably never happen again. It is what it is. Now, you can't just trade every single item on the auction house. There are some limits to that, but I will explain those later more in detail. Alright, now enough about the currencies. Now you might be asking, what is this small little Amitoi for that is consistently following you around, besides just being kinda cute? Well, the Amitoi is simply your pet. First of all, it collects all the loot that drops on the ground. Of course, if you walk over stuff yourself, you also pick it up, but the Amitoi just does that automatically for you. Additionally, these Amitois can heal you from time to time. You will notice we have these world tree leaves here. As soon as your character's HP drops below a certain percentage, the Amitoi will use a world tree leaf and heal you. It has always a 6-second cooldown, and it's just a passive healing. Just make sure you always carry enough world tree leaves with you. You can simply go to the Sunrise Merchant, which you will find in every city. It's this guy with this small bag over his head, and buy those for some Sollant. And as mentioned before, Sollant is really not a big deal in this game, so always have enough of those with you. Now, there are different Amitois in the game that you can collect. They can drop from world bosses, you can get them from quests, or from other sources. And here a small general tip. For items, or basically anything, you have that how to acquire button. That will always tell you where the item, in this case this Amitoi, comes from. So for example, this Amitoi drops from a dungeon. This is super useful at the beginning, so you can understand where specific resources or items come from. Okay, so we have different Amitois, but they all have the same power. There is an Amitoi that heals you more often or anything like that. So just pick the one that looks the cutest for you or the most badass. Then you can see in the top here that we have a second tab called the Lithograph Book. So at the beginning, this is really not important, but what it does is that it gives you some bonuses the more you collect from those Amitois. It's just stuff like more experience, higher drop rates, and stuff like this. It can be very useful in the late game, but it's nothing you have to worry about right now. Another thing that Amitois are used for are Amitoi Expeditions. You will get a quest relatively early in the game. Once you finish it, you will see a button right next to the world tree leaves. Clicking on that will teleport you into the Amitoi house. And here you can simply just do one thing. You take your Amitoi and send them on an expedition. You simply choose a region on this map, select the expedition time, and pick your Amitoi and send them off. Then they will go on this expedition and will bring you some resources back. Really nothing special. If you don't want to check in here every hour, just select 8 hours and forget about it. Also always try to pick the Amitois with the green up arrow here, because they will give you more rewards in that specific area. The more you do the expedition, the more you level up, and then you can run higher expedition and you get more and better resources. But let me be clear, it's not super important. You can do it or you can completely ignore it and you will still be totally fine. It just gives you some resources, which we will talk about later on more in detail. Enough about Amitois, now let's talk about Stellarites. Now, Stellarites are a simple way to boost your damage. Think of them like better ammo. If you equip them, you simply consume them on every attack you do and you deal more damage. There are two types of Stellarites that give you either a 10% or a 50% damage boost. You can just buy the basic Stellarites for some Sollant, again from the Sunrise merchant. So you can also use them whenever you want. It's not a big deal. You also get a ton of the better ones in the late game, so no worries here, but you usually just use them for important content where you really want to min-max your damage. Okay, then we have also an ultimate called Guardian. This is an ability where you transform into another form. In this form you get some bonus effects like an additional shield or some cooldown reduction or stuff like this. And this ultimate always lasts for 30 seconds and has a 15-minute cooldown. These can be really powerful, especially in PvP. If you go into your Guardian window, you can see there are a couple of Guardians to choose from. Of course, you don't have all of them from the beginning, you have to unlock them. Most of them you will just get by completing different side quests. Alright, now you're probably already using the morphing system actively, and you know that you can morph in the air, in the water, and on land into different forms, right? Now, similar to Amitois, there are a lot of different skins for those that you can buy and also farm in the open world. But again, no worries, there are no differences in power of those. You're not getting faster or anything like that. But again, the more you collect of them, you get smaller benefits. They are not huge, but they are just nice to have. Now, these are the most basic systems that you should understand at the beginning. Now, in the next section, we will talk about all the content that we currently have in the game. And afterwards, I will tell you then what is really important from that to progress your character, so that you have a plan what to do after level 55. So let's start with the major PvE content in this game. Now, as in pretty much every MMORPG, you have dungeons. Now, dungeons are grouped into 4 categories: Growth, Normal, Elite, and Epic. Before the recent update, they were named 1 to 4-star dungeons. Now, in theory, you can do all of them as often as you want, but the loot won't drop from bosses in dungeons. Instead, you will have a chest that you can loot at the end of the dungeon, and this will cost you dungeon tokens, which you are limited on. In the top right corner, you can see 2 types of dungeon tokens: Dimensional Contract Tokens 1 and Dimensional Contract Tokens 2. Every day, some of those tokens get refilled, and you can use them again to open those dungeon chests. So the tier 1 dungeon tokens are used for all the old dungeons, and the tier 2 dungeon tokens are always used for the newest dungeons, so for the epic dungeons. Now, one thing that I really like about the system is it gives you some tokens every day, but you don't have to use them daily. You can save them up and spend them all on one day. Of course, there is a limit. Just be careful that you always use them before you cap out. There's also an item that you can get from the Battlepass that will refill those points, so that you can actually do some more runs. But later on, when we talk about the Battlepass, I will exactly tell you what you should buy here. By the way, you have a party matchmaking system for all dungeons. You first select if you want to do a random dungeon or a specific dungeon, then you select your role, and then you just queue for it and you will be matched with a random team. This is like how most people are always doing their dungeons. And of course, one of the main reasons why you are doing those dungeons is because the new tier 3 gear will drop there. The next thing that you can do are dimensional trials. And this is basically your Mythic Plus system from World of Warcraft or the mutation system from New World. With the new update, this system also gets a complete overhaul. So it's basically your normal dungeons but with 10 different tiers. The higher you go, the harder the dungeon gets. Bosses get new mechanics and you have additional affixes on monsters or on yourself. That means, for example, that totems spawn randomly in the dungeon, that stun everyone, monsters explode when they die, or whatever. There will always be one active dungeon available per week. And this content is also not limited, so you can do it as many times as you want. You will always get rewards. Additionally, you will also have a leaderboard here. If you want challenging PvE content in the late game, this is your content. The main reason you are doing these is because of runes, which I will explain later on, of course, more in detail. But additionally, you even have a chance to get some special boxes that can contain the new tier 3 gear, but those boxes are limited to 5 times per week. But yeah, as mentioned, the main reason you are doing this is because of runes. Then a few months ago, we also got our first raid, which is our only 12-player PvE content in the game. Now, the raid has 3 stages, each with its own major boss and some trash mobs that you have to kill beforehand. And here again, similar to all normal dungeons, if you kill a boss, you get a chest that gives you some loot. Now for this one, you don't have any tokens like for normal dungeons. You can simply open a chest once per week. So you have 3 bosses, so that's 3 chests. But additionally, there are also 3 difficulties of the raid. And these are all separate chests. So if you do all 3 difficulties, you could get 9 chests per week. But no worries, almost no one is doing all 3 difficulties each week. The Nightmare mode, so the hardest version of this raid, is really hard. So you will need a static group for that. Most people just do the normal version or the normal version and the hard mode version. And I guarantee you, everyone can do the normal version. And with a little bit of practice, everyone can also do the hard mode version. So if you want to enter a group, you always have to travel to Herba Village and go to this raid portal. Here you can always see all the lobbies that are being created. For the normal version, there's also a simple dungeon finder that matches you with randoms, which works totally fine, no worries. But for the hard and nightmare modes, you have to create a lobby manually. So for those, of course, it's the easiest if you do that with your guild or if you have a specific Discord where you can find groups. I will leave you a good raid Discord for Europe in the video description. Okay, so the raid is your main progression for all the new heroic items, which we will talk about later more in detail. But these are just some special pieces of gear that are just really powerful. And all the gear and also the upgrade material will drop from those raid bosses. Now this was your group instance PvE content. Now there's also a lot of solo content which are called secret dungeons. These are more or less just some boss fights. First of all, you have the Tael's Tower, which you can already do during the leveling phase. It's a tower with 20 levels where on each level you face a different boss. These bosses have some smaller mechanics and you more or less just learn how to use your Q-block a little bit more. But overall nothing special, but you get a one-time reward, so of course something you want to do. Then you have the Gate of Infinity, which are always 2 rotating bosses. So every few days you will always get to hear a new one. It's almost the same bosses that you have also faced in the Tael's Tower, but just a lot stronger and some mechanics are a little bit changed. So as you can see here, you get the different rewards depending on how fast you kill the boss. To get the maximum rewards, you want to beat them here in under 3 minutes. But no worries here, if they didn't magically upscale those with the new patch, you will be able to do that after the Hyperboost service. So what is also really cool, if you really like to min-max your damage on those bosses, then you also can battle yourself against other players here. You will also get some additional rewards here if you are at the top. But that's really not important. You just want to beat them in below 3 minutes. That's just the most important thing to get the maximum reward out of it. And the last secret dungeon is Hall of Illusion. So this is more of a solo dungeon, which is also rotating every week. So on Thursday is always the weekly reset, so then you will always get a new solo dungeon here. And in those solo dungeons, you will always have 3 different levels. First a boss, then some trash, and then another boss. And as you can see, similar to the raid, we have 3 different difficulties. normal, difficult, and nightmare. Now, of course, these bosses get more and more mechanics with each level, and they actually get quite a bit harder. So even though your gear score will be probably high enough, the nightmare solo dungeons are not that easy for beginners, especially for some classes if they don't have a lot of self-healing. But no worries, the reward difference between the difficult version and the nightmare version is really not big. By the way, here it's similar to dungeon. After the last boss, there's a chest that you can open, which will give you then some loot. And you can simply open this chest 3 times per week. But compared to the raid, it does not matter on which difficulty you open the chest. It will always count. In total 3 chests, it does not matter on which difficulty. And those solo dungeons are also a really good source for runes and also for the new tier 3 gear. Now, this was our instance PvE content. But there's of course also open world PvE content. The first content here are open world dungeons. Now, open world dungeons are basically huge areas with a bunch of elite monsters in them. These can be huge areas with different levels and different difficulties in them, but they basically more or less fulfill all the same purpose. You just want to go there and kill all those elite monsters in there, because they will just give you a bunch of loot and additional experience. But as so often in Throne Liberty, this one is of course limited again. So right next to your dungeon tokens, you can see these abyssal contract tokens. Each time you kill an enemy in those open world dungeons, you will consume this currency. And this one is not automatically filling up, but you get these points through basically every content or activity you do in the game. So for example, you do some normal dungeons, then you're getting those abyssal contract tokens, which again you can spend in those open world dungeons. And here it's also similar to dungeons. You will also be able to refill some of those tokens through the battle pass. But as mentioned, we will talk about this later more in detail. Alright, now since these are all elite monsters, the most efficient way to consume all those tokens is to group up with a party and just simply AoE farm them. And no worries here, it's super easy to find a group for that. So you see this orange chat here? This is the looking for group chat. And you constantly see people here searching for other players for their groups. You just click in the group link in the chat and join a group. Now, you obviously don't know what all the aberrations in the chat mean, right? No worries, we will cover everything in this guide. So there are currently 3 different open world dungeons that are being consistently farmed. We have Temple of Truth, which is called Temple. Then we have Birken Estate, which is called Birkent. And then we have Crimson Manor, which is just called Crimson. So you will usually see some group link plus the aberration. Sometimes they will add something like B3, B1 or something like this. Now these are just the different floors in the open world dungeon. As soon as you are there, you will find it, no worries. As mentioned, if you want to join the group, just click on the group link, then port to the dungeon and follow all the other players. And then you just farm until you don't have any abyssal contract tokens anymore and you are done. This is really important because these monsters will directly level the masteries of your weapon. And no worries, we'll also talk about this later more in detail. But besides that, those elite monsters also drop so many good materials that you pretty much need for all your upgrades in the game. So doing those is just really important. One important note here, at night these open world dungeons become PvP areas. So everyone in there will be flagged and can be attacked by everyone. You of course don't lose anything or whatsoever if you die, but if you're farming there in the night, you will probably be farmed by someone else. If you enjoy open world PvP, you can go in there, otherwise just leave before, or if you get killed, just wait until the sun is going up again. The next activity you do in the open world are your contracts. These are basically daily and weekly quests. Now for your daily quests, so your daily contracts, you have a contract manager in every city. You just go to this contract manager and then they offer you a bunch of different quests that you have to complete in the open world. The quests are super simple. It's just kill 10 of these, 20 of those, gather 6 of that. You get the idea, right? It's super simple and straightforward. So these will give you all different kind of rewards that are all really useful, which you will understand later. Then you can see here on the top where you have to do those quests. For example, these ones you have to complete in Birken Manor, this one in the Black Anvil Forge. So these will always be areas around Herba Village. If you want to be efficient, you of course try to take as many as possible from one area. Now, what is important is that you see on the bottom right now 40 out of 60 contracts, right? every day I'm getting 10 new contract rights. That means similar to dungeons, you don't have to do them every day. You can wait here 6 days, save them all up, and then do them all on one day. By the way, if you're in an area where you have to do these contracts, you will always see all quest monsters or items have a yellow icon over their head. So this is really just super straightforward and simple content. Okay, now the next contracts we have to talk about here are the weekly contract. Now the weekly contracts you have to buy again on the Sunrise Merchant. Again, you can find this guy in every city. It's the one with the small bag symbol over the head. So the one where you also bought your Stellarites and your World Tree Leaves. Now if you go to one of these, you can see he sells these chests with a long name here. You can buy them for just some Solent, and those will be reset on the weekly reset every Thursday. And it does not matter when you buy them, but once a week you want to come here and buy those 6 chests. And no worries, you don't have to note that or whatsoever. I will give you later on a list of things that you should do on a daily or weekly basis. Okay, but these chests you can use whenever you want. They don't expire or whatsoever. You just need to buy them every week. When you open the chest, you have to decide which contracts you want. And here it's important that you always select the contracts for Talander, which is just the newest content for us. Now these contracts are similar to the daily contracts. They are super simple. You just have to kill some monsters here and there. But this time it's in open world dungeons. So where all the elite monsters are. So on the 3 different dungeons we just talked about. Birken Estates, Crimson Manor and Temple of Truth. If you open those chests, you will always get contracts from each of those open world dungeons. For Crimson, we have here 2 different types of contracts. It's in the same open world dungeon, just on different levels. Now, when you're doing your AoE farming in those open world dungeons, you can do those weekly contracts always on the side. You just accept some quests, and while you're AoE farming here, you can automatically complete them. Now, a small tip here. Usually groups don't kill bosses when they are AoE farming in those open world dungeons. It just takes too long to kill them. But a lot of those quests have them in. So what most people do is they reroll the quest until they get one that includes no boss. So if a quest has a 0 out of 1 somewhere, just reroll until you find something else. If you accepted them, it's not a big deal. Don't cancel them. You can ask from time to time your group to kill one of those bosses real quick. But again, you can do them every week or save them up. That's completely up to you. Now, as a reward, you will get those pouches. In those, there will be all kinds of different material, and you will also have a small chance also to get the new tier 3 gear. So it's really important to do those. But additionally, by finishing your daily or your weekly contracts, you will also get so-called contract coins. And these contract coins you can spend at the contract merchant, where you can buy a lot of useful stuff on a daily or weekly basis. And no worries, I will tell you later in detail what you have to buy here. Now the last open world content is a mix of PvE and PvE content, and it's all the events that take place throughout the day. To see what events are happening, simply open your map and click on the symbol here called timetable. Now here you can see all the events that are happening throughout the day. Red and purple symbols are always your world boss events, and the green symbols are all the other open world events. Okay, let's first talk a little bit about the world bosses. Now, when it's world boss time, you can click here on this little world boss icon, and it shows you on the map where the event is happening. If you are there, you always have 2 portals in front of each world boss. One for peace, that means there's no PvP, you just zerg the boss down and that's it. And the second one is called Dominion, where you will have always PvP. So how this works is you apply at the portal either as a team or solo, and then you get matched into an instance of up to 96 players. If you're in a peace event, you all just kill the boss together. And if you're in a Dominion event, you have to fight 48 versus 48, while at the same time you're trying to kill the boss. Now after the boss dies, you have a low chance, and it's really a low chance, to get some loot. And you can increase that chance by having a higher contribution. You get contribution through healing, tanking, and of course damaging the boss. But to be honest, it's really hard to get a high contribution as a tank or a healer. If you're not a DPS, you will probably not make it into the top 20. You will also always see in the Find Party chat, so the orange chat, people posting their groups, looking to group with other players for the boss. They fill up always really quick, so just keep trying until you find a group with space in it. As soon as you're in a group for the boss, you also don't have to go to the boss anymore. The leader will just always apply for the event and you will all be ported to the boss. Now there are also some special bosses called arc bosses. If you go to the daily timetable, you will also see them highlighted here. These are just special bosses that drop super rare gear. And here you can see again 2 at the same time. One has this little shield on it and the other one not. The one without the shield functions completely similar to the normal ones. And the one with the shield is a guild event where you fight in the open world, so it's not instanced, around those world bosses. This is something you do only if you are in a competitive guild. More information on that you don't really need right now. If you get into a guild and they participate there, they will teach you everything you need to know. Additionally, the same bosses you fight in the open world can also be summoned by your guild. Each guild can summon up to 7 guild bosses per week. This is important because, as mentioned, the drop chances on items from world bosses are pretty low. So these guild bosses just help players to get more access to those boss items. We will talk about this later more in detail, but guilds are important in this game and they will just help to progress your character. Okay, the other events are always at different times. Here you have again Peace, Dominion, Guild or Co-op events. And it really doesn't matter what kind of event you do, the goal is always the same and they always function the same way. You want to gather or collect certain materials, which will mostly just drop from certain monsters. Then you will bring those to an outpost and they will give you points for that. Depending on the event, it's a different area, it comes with slightly different routes, but in the end, you will always want to collect some stuff and bring it to an outpost. Again, in peace events, you have no PvP. In Dominion events, you have PvP. In guild events, you fight as a guild. And co-op events are also non-PvP events, but they just have some special routes to it. So I can already tell you, not a lot of people are doing that because they get really repetitive really quick and the rewards are also not that exciting. But you might have to do them if you're in a competitive guild because there's another system that is tied to those events, but at the beginning this is really not important. Try the different events out and see if it's fun for you. Additionally, if you want to be super efficient with these events, then you want to do 15 events per week. As you can see in the top right corner, you have those region contribution certificates. As long as you have them, you will get more rewards from these events. And yeah, every week they reset. But yeah, as mentioned before, probably only important for you if you're in a competitive guild. Okay, so for a lot of the PvE content we just talked about, you will also be rewarded with so-called adventure coins. You can spend them in a shop in Herba Village, which is called All Things Workshop. That shop is super important because you can get a lot of useful stuff here, including the new tier 3 gear. With the new update, we will also get a new coin specifically for the new gear. Okay, so enough about PvE. Now let's talk about all the PvP content in the game. First, let's talk about instance PvP. So there's of course arena PvP. There's either 3v3 or 6v6 arena, but only one of those is active at a time. Right now we have 6v6 arena, but that might change back to 3v3 soon. There are 2 maps that are chosen at random when you get into a match. The rules are always the same. You are basically killing each other to acquire tokens, and while you hold them, you are getting points. The first team to reach a threshold wins the match. Then of course you have normal and ranked matches. Normal matches are your casual place for PvP, and for the ranked mode you have a ladder that you can climb each season. The more you win, the higher you climb, and the better the players you will face. Of course there are also some special rewards if you finish at a high rank. One additional remark here about the arena, each team is always limited to 1 wand and 1 sword and shield per team. If you want to play with a wand in arena, then you should always play as a healer, because otherwise you won't have a healer in your team and then you more or less auto lose the game. It's kinda annoying, but there isn't really a way around that right now when it comes to arena. Then if you're not so much into small scale PvP, we are getting Battlegrounds with the new update. So this is a 24 versus 24 map. So 4 groups on each side. The map comes with different capture points and you again need to reach a certain points threshold, which you will get by killing other players. But the more capture points you control, the more points you will get per kill. Additionally, what I really like is that each team has a golem that can help for a certain time to shift the battlefield. No idea how balanced this is, but I'm super excited for that. In this mode, you can also play with a wand and the game won't automatically classify you as a healer because you decide what role you will be fulfilling in this match. Also not sure how they will balance that or if people will abuse the system. Still super excited for the content. The next PvP content is called Nebula Island, which is a separate island where the focus is open world PvP. You can access it by pressing escape and then you see Lawless Wilds. Just click on it and then you have a way to teleport to the island. Now on the island you have 5 different areas. And there you have essentially a bunch of elite monsters, some bosses and some point of interest. The big thing here is that in 4 out of the 5 zones, PvP is always active. So when you go there, day or night, anyone can always attack you if they are not in your group, guild or alliance. If you just like open world PvP, that's for sure your place. But you can also progress your character here. First of all, you can just farm all the monsters on the island, because they will drop a lot of materials that you will need for a special shop in Herba Village. And then you can buy from this shop a lot of different pouches, chests that will give you more chances for tier 3 items. And additionally, this is by far the best way to get artifacts in the game. You probably have no idea what artifacts are, but no worries, we will also talk about this later more in detail. But since there's so many elite monsters, what people are doing is they're grouping up again. So you build a solid roster and then again the AoE farm in those areas. Similar to what you do in open world dungeons. But here, from time to time, you will have to fight for your spot. Depending on your time you're doing that, it can be more chill or more competitive. Of course, there's also one area without PvP, but the loot you get there is way worse. You will also always find people in the chat trying to form groups here. Just join those and teleport to the island, and then you can fight there with them. Besides that, there are also some smaller events on the island, as well as world boss fights. And those world boss fights have some special routes to it. And of course, there will always be PvP events, but those content is really just for high competitive PvP guilds. So if you're on one of those, you will most likely compete on the island for those world bosses. Now, all the other PvP content is limited to guilds, which is mostly GVG content. There are a lot of details to this that I won't cover in this video. But just to give you an idea, you can see on this map all those outposts called Riftstones and Boonstones. Guilds will always fight for these outposts at set times. This will be always scheduled events you can also see here in the timetable. If your guild is holding an outpost, then you have to defend them against other guilds. And you will get benefits like additional stats or access to another world boss. As mentioned, guilds play a huge role in this game, especially if you enjoy GVG content. So there is even some other GVG content, but I would say these are the main events. The last PvP content, which is for sure also one of the selling points of the game, is the Castle Siege. And this is where you fight over control of the server's castle. And here alliances play a huge role. An alliance is a group of 2 guilds. There's always one alliance defending the castle. This is the alliance that currently controls it on the server. And then every other alliance is attacking the castle. You will have then different capture points you need to secure, respawn places you have to control, and special golems you can command that help you to destroy walls, gates, and so on. So there is some complexity to it. And castle sieges happens only every 2 weeks. There's also a bunch of Lucent and Solent that players can get depending on how far they make it. It can be really fun, but you need a good PC and of course a competitive guild to really enjoy the content. So we talked about the major PvP content. Now additionally, with the new update, we get a PvP shop. So through all kinds of PvP content you do, you will earn a currency that you can spend in the PvP shop. There's again a weekly reset on the rewards there, and you can also get the new tier 3 gear there. So if you are into PvP, this will be of course also really important for you. Okay, so we talked about PvE content, we talked about PvP content, but of course there are also life skills. Especially now with the new update, they introduce way more of them. But a lot of this content is completely new, and the older stuff is pretty straightforward. So I will keep this section a little shorter. You can mostly discover that on your own. So before the patch, we only had cooking, fishing, and the Amitoi Expedition. So for cooking, you have these ovens in every city where you can create all kinds of different food, which you will use then mostly in dungeons or in PvP events. Food in general is super important, but you don't have to craft it. You can also just buy it if you are too lazy for that. But of course, if you want the good stuff, you of course have to level your cooking skill, or you have to spend quite a bit of Lucent. So for the ingredients, you will get a lot of stuff just passively, just by playing the game. And then another good part of those ingredients you will get at the Sunrise Merchant. So there was the shop where we buy our World Tree Leaves and our Stellarites. It's just important some of those cooking ingredients have a daily limit. So if you're really into cooking, you should buy them daily. And then you will also get a few of those ingredients from the Amitoi Expedition, which we talked about at the beginning. So yeah, if you're really into cooking, then you should also focus on the Amitoi Expedition. Then for some recipes, you will need fish. And for this, you have to go fishing. This is pretty straightforward. You go to any water, sea, river, or whatever, press your fishing key, put some bait on it, and throw it in the water. You wait for a bite, and then you basically press A or D, depending on which direction the fish is swimming. You're trying to pull in the opposite direction. Then you wait until the fish stamina is gone, and you've got it. You can also level fishing, and there are different rods, and so on. Now, with the new update, we are also getting housing, and for housing, we also get more gathering and more processing of resources because we want to craft furniture. Then the whole housing system can be leveled and you can have up to 4 houses and more. But since I'm also not 100% sure how all of this will work, we will skip it here in this guide. Have fun discovering that on your own. Alright, now you know all the content in the game. So before we dive into all the vertical progression systems, which will definitely get confusing, I want to give you a simple guideline on what to do once you hit level 55. Okay, so after you hit level 55, you will get a lot of new growth missions that will give you just a lot of upgrade material. Obviously, you will want to do those right away. But while you're doing that, it's really important to build a strategy for them so you don't end up wasting your resources. The most important question that you should ask yourself is, are you happy with your weapon combination? Is it really something you enjoy playing? Of course, you can swap it later, but changing it after a couple of weeks will either cost you a lot of Lucent or heavily set you back at your progression. During leveling, as mentioned, it doesn't matter. But once you are 55, be sure you know what you want to play. Because, for example, you will start heavily investing into leveling your skills. And you, of course, want to do that for the right abilities. So be sure that this is your weapon combination. The next thing you should do is wait for new builds being theory crafted. If you don't want to waste your resources and all your Lucent, you should wait until veterans figure out proper builds for your class. Otherwise, you will 100% waste your resources and burn through all your Lucent before solid builds are theory crafted. And trust me, be patient here, save your resources, or just sell everything at the beginning, and once builds are theory crafted, just follow one of those. The next question you should ask yourself, do you want to spend any money on the game or not? If you're aiming to play free to play, which is totally possible, I highly recommend selling everything in the first weeks. That's where you make a ton of Lucent, and then after a few weeks you can gear your character properly. Because prices will be super high at the beginning, and almost every drop at the beginning will sell for crazy amounts of Lucent. But of course, if money isn't an issue and you want to be one of the strongest players right away, then sure, spend as much as you want, just make sure you actually have a strategy. Another really important question that you have to ask yourself, do you want to play PvP or only PvE? So what you have to understand is, it's really hard to PvP with a pure min-max PvE build. But with a min-max PvP build, you can do most PvE content. Of course, if you want to tackle the hardest PvE challenges, you will need proper PvE gear. But the key is to make this decision based on what you enjoy the most. If you want to do any PvP content, you will need a PvP build. Trying to PvP with a PvE gear is just not fun. If you're not sure at the beginning, that's totally fine. Don't rush it. Try some PvP, get a feeling for it, and see if you enjoy it or not. Just keep in mind, once you commit to a tier 3 build, it will take some time before you can build a second one. Okay, now you have a strategy, but you are still overwhelmed about what to do on a weekly or daily basis, right? What should you focus on? What are the most important things that you shouldn't forget? Okay, so by the way, on Thursday, we always have our weekly reset. Now let's say it's Thursday and all the weeklies have reset. Let me tell you what I would do on such a day. The first thing that I always do when I log in is I go to the different merchants and buy all the stuff that I need. Because I know myself, and otherwise I will for sure forget it. You might not even know what all the resources are for yet, but for now it's not a big deal. We will talk about those, of course, later. At the beginning, you should just know what you have to buy. Alright, so the first thing we do is we go to the Sunrise merchant. Here you can buy everything with Sollant. And this merchant, it's just important to buy every week your weekly contracts, and also these Tiles tower contracts. Then if you need more potions, then you can also buy them here daily, and additionally you will also get some cooking ingredients here. But both of those cooking ingredients and also the potions are super optional. The most important thing are for sure the weekly contracts. I, for example, never buy the cooking ingredients. Then you go to the guild merchant. Here you pay with guild coins, which you just get through different guild activities. Ideally you want to buy both of the healing potions and the polished crystals on a daily basis. So with the new update we are getting new polished crystals, but they will be also updated in all the shops. So yes, it's really good if you buy all of those resources on a daily basis. But it's also totally fine if you have not the time for that. What you absolutely want to buy every week are those conversion stones, which will be really important later on. Next up you go to the contract coin merchant. Here you pay, as mentioned before, with contract coins, which you get from your contracts. As you can see, you can buy here ores, parchment and stuff like that. Most of the stuff here is not that important. The most important things here are the extraction stones and the enchanted ink. You don't know yet what they are used for, but they are super important and you will always want to buy them every week. And then there's the resistance good merchant, where you need these special resistance medals. You get them through open world events and also through the exploration codex, so your side quests. There are a lot of things that you can only buy once in the shop, which can be really good at the beginning, but in addition, at the beginning I would always suggest you to buy the weapon mastery, the precious ore selection chest, the polished crystals and the unlock stones. Of course you have to see like how many points you actually have, but for me that would be my priorities. Okay, and the last thing that you always want to buy is at the rate good exchange merchant. Here you can always buy 5 chaos prisms each week. They will be super important for leveling your heroic weapons, which we will of course talk later more in detail. This shop might be not available for you for the first 2 weeks, but afterwards you always want to buy those 5 chaos prisms. There's also a Nebula shop and also a PvP shop. I'm not 100% sure yet what they give you, but I would say they are completely optional anyways, because they are only relevant for you if you're really into PvP. Alright, now we've bought all the important things. Perfect. Now, of course, there are also things you want to do every week, and there are other things that are not that important. Probably the most important thing to do are your dungeons. You don't have to run them daily, you can save up your points and do multiple runs in a single day, or just run them daily. It's totally up to you. But it's so important that you do them, because that's where you get a lot of the new gear from. So doing those dungeons is of course important for the drops. But as you remember, they also give you a ton of abyssal contract coins. And that brings us to the second most important thing. And that's farming in open world dungeons, where you have to consume all your abyssal contract coins. So you remember you group up with other players and then you just AoE farm in those dungeons. This is super important because first of all, this is by far the best way to level your mastery, especially if you do it correctly. More tips on that later in the mastery section. But secondly, you will just get so many good resources that you will need for pretty much every progression system. Leveling up your gear, your skills or whatever, you will drop so much material there. It's insane. You always want to spend your abyssal contract coins. While you are burning your abyssal contract coins, you also always want to do your weekly contracts at the same time. That first of all gives you more contract coins, and more importantly, it gives you more chances for the new tier 3 loot. And then talking about weekly contracts, it's also useful to do your daily contracts. They anyways go super fast, but they will additionally give you a bunch of resources that you need for upgrading all your stuff. So for sure, just do them. The next thing you should do every week is the raid on normal difficulty. This will be not important for you for the first 2 weeks, but afterwards, this is something you want to do every week. There are already a lot of guides out there. It's not too difficult. Don't worry. Just get in there. Maybe it takes a bit until you know what to do, but just do it. Because it's very important if you want to progress your heroic items. It's not the only way you get the upgrade material, but it's for sure the best way. The next thing that you always want to do are the world bosses. So when you go online, check when the next world bosses spawn and always participate, especially right after the new content drops. every item from those world bosses will be worth a ton of Lucent. If you get a drop, you can sell it and buy the stuff that you actually need. That's something you should put a high priority on early on. And the last thing that you always want to do are your secret dungeons. So each week, kill the bosses in Gate of Infinity and also do your 3 solo dungeons. For the solo dungeons, as mentioned in the beginning, just do them on the difficult level, it's way easier and you get almost the same loot. If you like the challenge, then of course go for the Nightmare mode, because those again can of course drop the new tier 3 gear. To sum it up again, do your dungeons, do the raid on normal difficulty, do both weekly and daily contracts, do your secret dungeons, and participate in as many world boss events as possible. Stuff like Nebula Island, raid on hard and nightmare. Other PvP events like guild battles or arena or trials will also give you progress, but you should only do them if you enjoy them. If you want to do all the content, of course you will progress faster, and if this is fun for you, go for it. But these here are just the most important things you want to do as much as possible. Okay, one other thing before we get to the vertical progression systems. As mentioned, guilds are a big thing in this game, and choosing the right one is actually really important. The first reason why it's so important is because all world boss drops and also guild raid boss drops usually go first to the guild bank. So let's say you go to a world boss, you drop an item, then this item is not going to your inventory. This item goes straight into the guild bank. And there are 4 common ways guilds usually deal with loot. The first one is a DKP system. You actually see this really often in competitive PvP guilds. Basically what happens here is that you earn points for each event that you participate in. And with those points you can then bid on all items your guild is dropping. It doesn't matter if you drop the item or someone else did. You can bid with your points on everything that drops in the guild. The second system is also an auction system, but here people bid with Lucent against each other. So let's say an item drops on the world boss, then everyone can bid with Lucent, so the premium currency, on this item. If you win, you pay the Lucent to the guild, and then usually the guild spreads those Lucent earnings among all guild members. So the people with more Lucent will get the items in the beginning, but you will constantly get Lucent from the guild, which can be nice. But if you don't want to spend Lucent, then you won't be getting items from the guild. Now the next system that you see more and more nowadays is that everyone just keeps their loot immediately when it drops. So no sharing with the guild. You just get your item right away and then you can sell it, use it, or do whatever you want with it. And the last system that you see sometimes is when a guild has a loot council that decides who gets the items, which is usually just the guild lead, which means you are being scammed. You know, we live in a world with a lot of scammers, and you have them in Throne Liberty too. They create a guild, recruit new players, and then they try to scam all their world boss drops. That's why you need to be a little bit careful when you are joining a guild. For me, the best way to find a guild is just through the official Throne and Liberty Discord. There's a recruitment tab where you can find a lot of guilds that are actively searching for members. Just keep in mind, always ask how they handle loot drops. Of course, the systems are not always exactly like I just described. Sometimes it's just a variation of these. Alright, the second reason why searching for the right guild is important, because not every guild does all types of content. You want to do a lot of GVGs, so Riftzone and Boonstone fights, or you want to participate in the Castle Siege, which is a huge part of the PvP content in this game. If you want that, then you have to look for a semi or hardcore competitive PvP guild. Casual guilds can of course join those fights too, but if you really want to enjoy it, trust me, you need a good guild for that. If you don't care about that, no worries. Just look for a PvE guild. But yeah, whatever you do, it's still really good to be in a guild simply because of the guild rates. Because otherwise it will be just hard for you to get access to a lot of the world boss drops. And yes, of course, it's obviously just way more fun playing in a community. So go check out the official Throne Liberty Discord and find the right guild for you. Now that was all nice, but now we need and also want to understand how we can actually progress our character. So how do we upgrade our gear, our skills, our runes, and so on? And for that we need to talk about some things that might be sometimes a little bit confusing. But bear with me, I'll try my best and explain it as clear as possible. Okay, so let's start with our skills. All the skills from every weapon in the game you just unlock by leveling up. As soon as you level 50, you have access to all skills from every weapon, but you will need to level up every skill individually. When you first start out, every skill has a little green 1 in the bottom right of the skill icon. This color and number indicate the level of the skill. Green 1 is simply the lowest level. For skills, you have 3 different tiers: green, blue, and purple. Also called uncommon, rare, and epic. And each tier always has 5 levels, which is what the number shows. So at the beginning, your skill is uncommon, level 1. And when you level the skills, they first become blue, then purple, and in the end, they stay on the maximum purple level 5. Now, how do you do that? You just go to the skill window. Now, here you click on this little up arrow next to the skill you want to level up. In that window, you will see a level up button. You just press it, and then you get a randomized progress on your current level. Sometimes you make less progress, sometimes more, but important, you will always make progress. You can't fail an upgrade. Of course, for some abilities it will take longer, if you're unlucky, and for others it might go faster. It is what it is. And then on the right side, you will see the resource you need for upgrading, which are always skill growth books. If you want to level up a green skill, you need green skill books. Once it reaches the next tier, you will need blue skill books. And for the last tier, you will need purple skill books. And additionally, the higher you go, the more skill books you need. Going from level 1 to 2 is quicker than going from 2 to 3. I think overall the system is just pretty straightforward. Now the big question, how do you get those skill books? In every bigger city you find a skill researcher, like this Sheldon guy here. That's where you craft your skill books. For crafting you always need some parchment and those blue crystals. So depending on what tier you craft, the resource quality changes, but it's always the same. For green books, for example, you need lower tier crystals and parchment than, for example, for blue books. Here would need then better parchment and better crystals. That's it. Now, how do you get those resources? Probably the best way is simply farming in the open world dungeons. Like I mentioned earlier, you just grew up with a team and AoE farm elites in those open world dungeons. You will passively get a lot of resources, including parchment and also these blue crystals. It's by far the best way to get everything you need to craft those books. But on top of that, the game also gives you a lot of complete skill books for free. You will get them from the Battlepass, from the events, and additionally also from the growth missions that come with the Hyperboost service. So you really don't have to stress about farming them too hard in the beginning. You will get plenty of them passively. Now one more thing, there are 2 different types of skills. Every weapon has 10 normal skills and 2 precious skills. Precious skills are leveled the exact same way, but they use precious skill growth books. For those you just need a little more resources and a special parchment, but that's not changing anything. You will still find everything in those open world dungeons. Alright, one last thing about skill books. In the beginning you will need a lot of green and blue books, but maybe you only have purple books from the battle pass or from the growth missions, or you only have the better resources. That's not a big deal, because you can always downgrade the tier of books and also from resources. How you do that? You just click on the item and then click on this alchemy symbol where it says dissolve. That converts the resource into a lower tier. For example, purple parchment becomes blue parchment. So by default, it does this for everything you have in your inventory. But if you want to reduce the quantity here, just press Shift plus left click and you can choose how many to dissolve. The only cost is a little bit of Sollant, which I've said already plenty of times before is not a big deal. And of course, you can also do the other way around. So you go back to Sheldon and you can upgrade your blue parchment back to purple parchment. Again, it just costs you a bit of Sollant, but you don't lose any resources. This also works for skill books themselves. You can dissolve them into lower tiers. But here you will lose some resources in the process. So if possible, always try to downgrade resources into lower tiers and then craft the books you need. Only if you don't have enough and you can't wait, then you can break down your epic books. Just keep in mind that you will lose a portion of your resources when you do that. Okay, that's all you need to know about upgrading skills. Now we have to talk about the most important upgrading system, and that's the gearing system. If you press escape and then click on equipment enchanting, you will see a window with different tabs. Level up, transfer, trade, sync, and stat conversion. These are all part of the gear upgrading process. We will go through them one by one with examples, and afterwards you will understand all of it. And yes, I know this can be a bit confusing sometimes, but I will try my best to make it as clear as possible. Alright, now before we jump into the upgrading, we have to understand how gear is structured. So first of all, there are of course different tiers of armor. Common, uncommon, rare, rare 2, epic, epic 2, epic 3 and heroic. That sounds like a lot, but everything below epic 2 is really only relevant for the leveling phase. Those are the tiers we have already passed. Now the cool thing is that after you finish the Hyperboost Codex, you will be at Epic 2 gear. And Epic 2 gear was until now the highest gear we had. With the new add-on that is dropping, we get Epic 3 gear, the new highest tier that everyone will try to get. There is also heroic gear, but that's a little bit special and we will talk about it later in its own section. So the important bit is Epic 2 was the best before the September update, and Epic 3 is now the new best. Now let's have a closer look at how the gear is structured. Let's take this Voidstalker chest piece as an example. You can always split items into 3 parts. In the top section, you have your basic stats. In the middle, you have your traits, and at the bottom you sometimes have set bonuses. The basic stats on an armor piece always include some defense values and then other stats like attributes, for example. Every time this item drops, it comes with exactly those stats. There's nothing random to roll perfectly or whatever. Same defense values, same attributes, and so on. Now the trait section is where we can modify the item with the traits we actually want. So we can give the item specific stats that are useful for us. In this example, I put range endurance, buff duration, and max health on the piece. For every item, you always have a pool of traits that you can choose from. These are just the traits that I chose on this armor piece. How you do all of that, I will explain super in detail. Okay, now that we understood how the gear is structured, we can talk about the first step in our window. And that's all about leveling our gear. And they're similar to skills, you have to level each individual armor piece. All the new armor pieces you can level up to level 12. And when you level up an armor piece, it always increases the base stats on that item. So we remember the fixed stats on the armor. That's what you're upgrading. Okay, so first of all, you go to the level up tab and you select on the right side the armor piece that you want to upgrade. Now on the left, you can see which values are actually increasing when we level this armor piece. Now the upgrading works very similar to how it does for skills. You press level up and it just levels. Again, you get a random progress. Some items will go up faster, some will take way longer. It is what it is. But you will always make progress. Of course, this is not for free. For those, you will need those growth stones. Again, it's similar to skills. Depending on the tier of the item, you will need higher tier growth stones. So for the new tier 3 gear, we actually also have new growth stones. You can't use the old ones anymore. And on top of that, which is a little bit different to skills, you have growth stones for weapons, armor, and accessories. They all work exactly the same, but they are separate. So how do you get those growth stones? Well, in every city you have a weapon, armor, and accessory crafter. If I go to the armor crafter, for example, you will see I can craft armor growth stones. At the weapon crafter, of course, you can craft weapon growth stones and so on. And as you can see, the resources for the different growth stones are basically the same. They just differ in the color of the ore that you need. Now again, the question, how do we get those resources? So the first thing is magic powder. You always get magic powder by dissolving items. Like I explained before, you can use dissolving to downgrade resources. But when you do it with items, you destroy the item and get magic powder from it. The higher the tier of the item, the more powder you get. Of course, you only do this with items you can't sell or you really don't need. For example, a really good way to get those powder is if you farm in the open world dungeons for a while, you will drop a ton of random blue items. So what I always do then is you just click on one of those blue items, click on this little dissolve icon, then you select here rare and rare 2 and then press dissolve. That will dissolve all your blue items in your inventory and you will always get a bunch of magic powder out of it. Next, you need the different ores. If you remember, for skill growth books, we needed blue ores, right? But for the gear, we need yellow, green, and red ores. And again, there's a lot of ways to get them, but one of the best ways is again farming elites in the open world dungeons. So as you can tell, going into those open world dungeons and burning your abyss tokens is super important, because that's where you get a lot of the upgrade materials you need. And finally, the noble polished crystals is the new resource you need for crafting the new glowstones. And these will drop in all the same places the old ones dropped. So nowadays you will basically get them from pretty much every piece of content in the game. Open world dungeons, open world events, world bosses, dungeons, whatever you do, you will get these new crystals. Okay. Now we understood how to level our gear. So let's talk about the second tab, the transfer tab. So what does transferring do? It lets you transfer experience from one item into another one. Let's say you have a level 12 weapon. You can transfer this experience from this weapon into a level 0 weapon. And that weapon will then be level 12, but the old one will be destroyed. So basically you move the experience from one item into another one. So the first use case could be that you suddenly decide to play a different weapon, but you don't want to level this weapon again from scratch. Then what you could do is you just simply transfer the experience into the new weapon. And that being said, this is something you usually don't do that often anymore, because there's simply a better way how you would handle such a use case. And we will talk about that right after this transfer topic. But this is still an option. But where you will always use the transfer system is when you upgrade into a new tier. For example, when you finish the Hyperboost quest, you end up with level 12 Epic 2 gear. Now with the new content we get tier 3 gear. And when you get this new gear, you don't start from level 0 again. Instead you transfer the experience from the old gear into the new one. Of course the new gear requires more total experience, so it won't be directly level 12. But it will be already level 6. That's why it's so good that every new player gets plus 12 Epic 2 gear. It puts you in the same level as veteran players. We also just have Epic 2 level 12 gear. And we will all be transferring into the new tier 3 gear. Now it's important to know that you can only transfer within the same item type. A helmet must transfer into another helmet, a chest into a chest, and so on. But this is only for armor and accessories. For weapons, the type actually doesn't matter. You can transfer a bow into a greatsword, a staff into a wand, and so on. Another important thing, all your traits, so the stats that you put onto the item, will be destroyed when you transfer into a new item. So for example, in this case, all these stats would be gone if I transfer this item into another one. Only the experience gets transferred. So you would transfer something called Blessing, but you have no clue what this is right now. But of course I will explain that later. But yeah, it's just important, all your traits will be destroyed. And then of course you can't transfer multiple times into one item. You can do this only once. So you always want to make sure that the item is on the max level before you transfer it into the new item. So to sum it up, transferring is mostly used to move the experience from an old item into a new one, especially now when we are moving from tier 2 to tier 3 gear. Perfect, now let's talk about the sync tab. And yes, we skipped the trade tab for now, but we will come back to it afterwards. So what does synchronization do? The system allows you to sync the experience between two items. So as you can see, we have here slots for each weapon, armor, or accessory piece. Okay, now for example, I have here a level 12 wand. Now I put that into the weapon synchronization slot. And now I can take any other weapon at level 0, put that into the sync slot, and the experience is synchronized. This means this weapon is now also level 12. This is super important in the late game because it allows you to have multiple builds without having to level each item from scratch over and over again. Now to do this, you first have to unlock those sync slots. This costs a little bit of Sollant and quite a few glowstones. How to get the glowstones we already talked about in the leveling section. And the Sollant is whatever. But as soon as you unlock a few of those slots, you will suddenly have so much more freedom to try out different builds. It's really important. And that's why I mentioned before, transferring the experience into another item of the same tier doesn't make much sense anymore. If you want to switch, in most cases you just unlock one of these slots and that's it. That's why you don't have to destroy the old weapon, because maybe later you actually want to switch back to this weapon. And if you destroyed the weapon with the transfer process, that would of course be really stupid. So yeah, synchronization super important in the late game. Now we have to talk about trading gear. And honestly, this is by far the most annoying thing to explain because it really can be confusing. So I won't rush it. I will go into detail here and give you lots of examples so everyone can understand it. Okay, so as mentioned before, trades are simply stats on your items. But the difference is you can actually decide what stats you put on the item. Each item can have up to 3 different traits, and each trait can be stacked up to 4 times. And in this section of the video, I will explain exactly how you add them, how you change them, and how you modify everything. And this is really important to understand, so bear with me. The first thing you need to know is that all items have trait pools you can choose from. For every item, there are always 6 possible traits. To see them, you just click on the item and then click on this small icon where it says Trait List. Now, for this ring, for example, we can see the 6 possible traits. This pool of traits is also very similar across all other rings. There are always small differences, but for the most part, if it's the same type of item, it has very similar traits. Alright, so the second thing you need to understand is that when an item drops or is crafted, it always comes with one random trait on it. So for example, in this case, I dropped this purple sword and shield and it came with attack speed. Now, because you can't sell every item on the auction house, there's something called trait extraction. We will look more into details what items you can sell and what you can't sell later in a specific section for the auction house. And I will explain all the tips and tricks you need to know for that. But for now, it's just important to understand some dropped items can't be sold. But what you can always do though is extract the first trait the item dropped with. And then you can take this trait extraction and sell it on the auction house. So for example, I have this staff here, which came with the trait critical hit chance. Sadly, I can't sell this item on the auction house directly. What I can do now is extract this critical hit chance from the item. So you click on the item, then you click on the symbol where it says trait extraction, and then I can extract the trait for some trait extraction stones. Okay, so we need for trading a few resources. I won't explain it here now right away. I will just do that at the end of this section for all the resources. But what you can see now, the icon for this item has now a silver border. That means it's just a trait extraction, not a full item anymore. I can't equip it anymore because it's only the trait from the item. But these trait extractions can be used for trading your gear, and those you can always sell on the market. So trait extractions let you pull the first trait of an item, and you can always sell them on the marketplace. Super important for the whole trading process. Now back to our example. We have our sword and shield with attack speed on it. But what I actually want on this item is hit chance, max health, and heavy attack chance. So we need to change the existing trait, unlock 2 new traits, and then also stack each trait 3 more times. And we will do that now together on this example. And I will explain all the routes you need to know along the way. Let's start here by unlocking the 2 new traits. So first of all, we select the weapon in our trait window. Now, there are 2 options to add a trait. The first option is to click Unlock Trait selectively. Here you just choose the trait you want and you will get it. Sounds easy, but this costs trait unlock stones. And trait unlock stones are not that easy to get. At the end of the section I will explain the best way to farm them, but for now just remember they are not easy to get. So that's method 1, using unlock stones and just selecting the trait that you want. Now the second method to add a new trait is by using the exact same item again. So for example, we have this sword and shield with attack speed on it, right? If we also had the same item but with max health, we could add that max health trait on our weapon. And here's where our trait extractions come into play. Because instead of using the same item, we can also use a trait extraction from the same item. For example, I have here a trait extraction from this exact same weapon. but with max health. So that means someone dropped the item with max health on it. They couldn't sell the full item directly, so they extracted the trait and sold the extraction on the auction house. I bought it, and now I can use this trait extraction to put max health on my weapon. So to unlock traits, you either need trait unlock stones or the exact same item with the desired trait on it. And that can also be in form of a trait extraction. Now, which method should you use? And this really depends on the prices in the auction house. If an item drops often, then people extract traits from it all the time. And those traits are usually cheap than on the market. But if an item drops not that often, like for example from a world boss, then even the trait extractions will be super expensive. Because remember, even for a trait extraction, the item first had to drop. In those cases, it's often better to just unlock the traits with your unlock stones. In our case here, the trait extractions are super cheap. So for just a little bit of Sollant, I put them onto the weapon. Okay, now we know how to unlock a trait. Next, let's look at changing an existing trait. And this works almost the same way. So if we click on our attack speed trait, the first option we see is trait selection again. And this lets us choose the trait we want, exactly like before with trait unlock stones. The only difference here is that we now also need some conversion stones. For now, you just need to know that conversion stones are a lot easier to get than, for example, unlock stones. Okay, and the other method is if we click here on trait conversion. Here you will see two options: guaranteed trait conversion and trait chance conversion. The guaranteed conversion is the same method as before. You need the exact same item with the trait you want, and then you can change it. For example, I have a trait extraction with hit from our weapon, so I could change the attack speed trait into hit. The only difference here is that you also need to pay some conversion stones on top. The second option, trait chance conversion, is basically gambling. You spend a bunch of conversion stones and it randomly rolls one of the 6 possible traits. So this can make sometimes sense, especially if the trait extractions for your weapon are super expensive and if you have more than enough conversion stones. Because the problem is that we will need so many unlock stones, and if we can save unlock stones somewhere, that's always good. In our case, as mentioned, since the trait extractions are pretty cheap, we will just go with the guaranteed trait conversion. Alright, now we have our desired traits unlocked on the weapon. But as you can see, it always shows us 1 out of 4. That's because every trait can be stacked up to 4 times on an item. And this process is called Enchanting. And of course, Enchanting has its own rules. They are pretty similar, so bear with me. So the biggest difference when it comes to Enchanting is you don't need the exact same item anymore. You just need any weapon of the same tier with the desired trait on it. So for example, I could use this bow trait extraction with hit to level up the hit trait on my sword and shield. It doesn't need to be the same weapon anymore, as long as it's the same tier and has the trait I want. So that means for Enchanting, you can always go for the cheapest trait extraction you can find on the market. And that makes the Enchanting process way cheaper. So to sum it up, for weapons, you can use any weapon with the desired trait as long as it's the same tier. For armor and accessories though, it's a little stricter. Here you always need the same type of item. So if you want to enchant a trait on a helmet, you will always need another helmet. It doesn't need to be the same helmet, but another helmet. And this is how it works for all armor and accessories. Now we are almost done with trading the gear. There is just one more method to enchant your gear. And to be honest, for you as a beginner, this is not super important. You won't use that often, but it's still good to understand. So with the method we just used before, we always used items on the same tier, right? Our shield was epic 2 and our bow was also epic 2. Now you can also use lower tier extractions to enchant your gear. For example, I have this epic 1 sword and shield with a hit trait on it. But now you can see here it only has a 10% chance to succeed. So when you use lower tier trait extractions, you can still enchant your items, but you will only have a chance to succeed. And this isn't just gambling, because every time you fail, you get something called blessing. For example, here we failed the attempt, but we got 80 blessing for that. The cool thing is you can use that blessing to increase the chance to succeed on your next try. So if we take here another epic 1 item, so an item that is in lower tier, it would still have a 10% base chance. But if I click here use blessing, my chance goes up by 8% because I would use my 80 blessing here. So what people do is they fail stack. They purposely stack blessing on items until they can guarantee an upgrade, even with lower tier items. But of course for this the price difference between, for example, tier 1 and tier 2, or for us then later on tier 2 and tier 3, needs to be around factor 10. And the market usually balances itself really fast out. That's why for you as a beginner, you won't be really doing this a lot. It's still good that you know how it works, because as soon as you're getting heroic items, you always want to do that. Why, we will talk about later. But it's still good to know how this process works. But additionally, even if you never do fail stacking, you still get blessing on your weapon more or less passively. You remember the transfer process, right? Where we moved experience from one item into another. That process also transfers all blessing to the new weapon. So if your old weapon had some blessing, it just carries over. And on top of that, if your old item had traits, those traits will also get converted into some blessing. So even if you never manually fail stack, when you transfer into the new gear, you will usually end up with some blessing anyway. And you can then use the blessing just like I showed you. But yeah, I think that's more than enough to know about blessing and fail stacking right now. Like I said, as a beginner, it's just good to understand the basics. And I'm sorry, but I lied to you. We are actually not done with trading the gear yet. Yes, we now have our 3 fully maxed traits on the item. But now we can also put a 4th trait on the item, which is called Resonance Effect. To do this though, you always need to have all the other 3 traits fully maxed out. Only then you can put the resonance effect, the last trait, on the item. Now again, there are 2 options for this. The first one is the gamble option. If you click here, you will see on the right all the possible traits and the percentage chance of hitting each one. So you just press the unlock trait button and you will get one of them randomly. To do this, you will need something called trait resonance stones. Where you get them from, I will explain after this chapter. So that's the first option. You roll and hope for the best. The second option is that you select one of the traits and you're guaranteed to get it. This also costs you resonance stones, but of course way more than the gamble option. My recommendation: don't gamble. Just wait until you have enough resonance stones and then pick exactly the trait you want. So I think adding the last trait is pretty straightforward. Now we understood the whole trading process. The last thing that we need to look at is where you actually get the different resources from. So we had trade extraction stones, trade unlock stones, trade conversion stones, and trade resonance stones. So 4 different kind of stones. All of these stones you get from a lot of different sources. A little bit here, a little bit there, but let me give you the main sources. The first one is battle passes and different events. That's for sure one of the ways you will get all of them in a somewhat regular basis. Then specifically unlock stones you will mainly get from the All Things workshop. Remember at the beginning I explained how you earn adventure coins for basically all the content you do in the game. Well, you can spend those coins in the All Things workshop, and in this shop you can exchange them for unlock stones. This is by far the most consistent way to get a lot of unlock stones. But yeah, it still takes quite a while. We really need better sources for farming them. But yeah, it is what it is. So if you watched the whole video so far, then you are first of all crazy, but secondly, you maybe remember that we bought conversion stones at the guild merchant and extraction stones on the contract merchant. You can buy them there on a weekly basis, which you for sure always want to do. Super important. And now finally the trade resonance stones. For those we have to talk about the new system called material transmutation. The system lets you convert items you don't need into random new items. You take any type of gear, put it into this system, and it spits out a random new piece of gear. If you are lucky, you might even get some rare drops. But that's not really important here. The important part is you will also always get trade resonance fragments as a reward from this process. And then you take these fragments, you can go to any crafter in a city and convert them into resonance stones. So basically you recycle items that you don't need, you get a random new item out of it, plus fragments that you can turn then into resonance stones. You really won't need this system much at the beginning, but it's still good to know about it for later on. Now I wanted to have a separate section just for heroic gear. For the most part, trading and leveling works exactly the same. There are just a few extra things you should know, and I just didn't want it to confuse people even more. So let's take a look at that now. So heroic gear is the best gear we have in the game. It's even better than the new tier 3 gear, but you only can equip one weapon, one armor and one accessory piece. Now heroic items only drop from the new raid. There's also a shop where you can buy heroic items, but for those you need a resource that you mostly get from doing the raid. So you can also get the resources from some events or the battle pass, but really you want to do your weekly raid, otherwise it will take forever to get your heroic items. Now if you look at the gear, you will see that it looks a little bit different from normal gear. But again, at the top we have our base stats from the item, and at the bottom we have our traits. Now for the base stats, first of all, you will notice we have way more stats, and additionally you can change a few of them. So when an heroic item drops, the first part of the base stats is always the same, and the second part will roll randomly. For example, this cape dropped for me with mana cost efficiency, range and hit chance. I haven't changed anything on it. Now changing the stats isn't complicated. For this we go back to our equipment enchanting window, and then we have the last tab called stat conversion. Now here you can simply select your heroic item and the stat and you can change it. But the problem is it costs 800 unlock stones, which is just a lot. And as mentioned, those are not easy to get. That's why I haven't changed it on this cape. I don't have enough unlock stones. So if all the stats are bad for you and you have to change all of them, you will need over 2k unlock stones. And let me tell you, that's insanely much. So a good strategy before investing into a heroic item is to reroll this item a few more times. Either you hope that the item drops again in the raid, or maybe you buy another one. That way you have another chance at better base stats. I would say you should have at least one fitting trait on it. Otherwise it will be just hard for you to finish this build in time till they release the next gear. No joke. Remember, you have 3 heroic items. Be patient, don't rush it. Okay, but all these stats will just get stronger as you level the weapon. Exactly the same with normal items. And leveling also works the same. You can go to any crafter and there you can craft heroic glowstones to level your heroic items. The main resource here, the Chaos Prism, is one of the main rewards you get during the raid. Again, you can also get it through the battle pass and events, but your main source will be the raid. Other than for leveling, it's just important to know that you're not transferring anything into this weapon. You will always start from 0 and then slowly level it up, which for sure will take some time. Now for trading, it follows the exact same rules we discussed before. You can unlock the trades with unlock stones, which of course are super expensive here, or you can use trade extraction from the exact same weapon. And for enchanting, it's also exactly the same. If you use the trait from the same tier, you guarantee it, and if you use a lower tier, you just have a chance. But here it's important, traits will be super expensive at the beginning on the Hyperboost servers. If you want the power early, go for it. Or maybe you can wait, it's totally up to you. But after a few weeks, the prices will drop heavily. If you go for it, you 100% want to use the phase stacking method. Because for enchanting, you will need a lot of traits, and if you use them always on the same level, it's just way too expensive. So here always use Epic 2 gear to fail stack the item, and then you can guarantee the process. It will still cost a little bit, but it's way cheaper. Now additionally, those heroic weapons won't have a passive on them. So for example, if you lock on this heroic sword and shield, you can see there is no passive in it. The cool thing about heroic weapons is that you can socket any other passive into them. Now how you do that is you go to this skill core device, which is right next to the entrance of the raid. If you're on the device, you will see 2 tabs. One for extracting the skill core, so skill core is how they call it, and 1 tab for imprinting it. You just select the weapon you want to extract the skill core from, and then you take this skill core and imprint it into the weapon you want. But of course this isn't free. You need a skill core extraction scroll for extracting the skill and a skill core imprinting scroll for imprinting it. You can simply go to any crafter in the game and craft those scrolls. Once you get to the point where you need those, you will already know all the resources you need here, especially if you watch the whole guide. It's not cheap, so you can't change your skill back and forth all the time, but since you're just doing that once, it's actually okay. Okay, we've finally made it through the gear section of the video. And now you know how to completely upgrade your gear. And trust me, all the other stuff is way less confusing and less complicated. Hopefully. Alright, let's go ahead and take a look at the runes. We already looked how armor pieces are structured. We have our base stats and our traits. Now, weapons and accessories also have rune sockets. Runes are basically like gems you know from other games. You socket them into your gear and then they just give you some bonus effects. To manage this, you have a specific rune book. If you open it, you will see all your weapons and accessories on the right side. Let's take this bow here for example. You can see it has 3 locked rune sockets. If you click on one of them, you can choose between a red, a blue or yellow socket. Red runes are offensive, yellow are supportive and blue are defensive runes. So as you can see, it just cost me some Sollant. So for now, let's just take here the red one. And what we can do now is simply socket one of our red runes here into this slot and we get some additional stats. Straightforward. But additionally, you can get even more stats if you go for specific rune configurations. If you click here on the rune synergy list, you will see different color combinations you can go for. Let's say I want this extra dexterity and attack speed. For that, my first rune has to be red. The second yellow and the last blue. The first one is already correct, so I just need to change the other two. Now I put just some random runes in and you can see the rune synergy effect is active. And that's almost it. There's only one additional thing that you need to understand about runes, and that's chaos runes. Those runes always come with a positive and a negative effect. And they can be placed in any rune socket. The color doesn't matter here. But important, each item can only contain one chaos rune. So for example, if I want more defensive than offensive stats, I could use this chaos rune here with more max HP and place it in a red socket. The important thing, the rune synergy would still remain active. So they're working similar to a joker. Now this you have to set up for both your weapons and all your accessories. But now you might ask, how do you actually get these runes? Well, the runes you see here are all the runes you can get. At the beginning, they will all start at level 0 and you will get a decent rune level boost already through the Hyperboost service. After that, nowadays you level runes through pretty much every content you do in the game. You go to a world boss, you get runes. You do a solo dungeon, you get runes. You don't really have to farm them actively anymore. But if you really want to push them, the best way to farm runes is still through dimensional trials. You remember, those are your dungeons on a higher difficulty. The cool part is you can do them as often as you want and you will always get runes as a reward. But keep in mind, it definitely takes some time and it's a crazy grind. So yeah, that's everything you need to know about runes. You can place them into your weapons and accessories and you will level them up to pretty much every content in the game, especially through dimensional trials. Okay, now let's continue with the masteries. If you go to your skill window, you can see here the current mastery level of your equipped weapons. If you click on one of them, it opens the mastery tree for the weapon. Now, each individual weapon has its own mastery level, and with that, its own mastery tree. The mastery tree is split into 4 quadrants: attack, support, defense, and tactics. In those quadrants, you can spend your mastery points that you get from your level to get different bonuses. This, for example, is how your mastery tree could look like later on. Everywhere where you see these numbers, I have invested some mastery points. And then you have also those passives that are automatically activated when you spend points in the mastery tree. And these bonuses here can be simply things like just a few more stats, but they can even change how certain abilities work. Having a high mastery in your weapon and being able to spend more points will definitely be super important for you. And these mastery points are always active and count for both weapons. It really doesn't matter which weapon is in your main hand. Alright, so at the beginning, all of these mastery nodes will be locked. To unlock them, sometimes you just need some Sollant, and for others you will need certain type of ores. It's the same ores we also used for the different glowstones. Again, the best way to get them is by farming in open world dungeons and doing your daily contracts. After unlocking the nodes you want, you can spend your points in here. So how this works, you always start from the inner ring and then work your way further out, because that's where you often find the really powerful nodes, especially the 4 ultimate nodes, which can have a huge impact on your character. But you will always need 30 points in one ring to unlock the next one. Okay, then also you will notice each ring has passives above it that automatically activate once you have points in the ring below. So let's refresh this here. Now you can see when I spend points in the ring, I automatically activate here far side. And that's just because I have 2 nodes active in the red quadrant. If I, for example, also take this node, I would activate this passive because I would have 2 nodes in the red quadrant and 2 nodes in the yellow quadrant. But if we take these 2 nodes up here, you will see we won't activate Life Ward because you can only have 2 of those passives active in one ring. That counts also for the ultimate abilities. You can only have 2 of those active at the same time. Okay, so we understood the mastery system, but how can we level our weapons now as fast as possible? As so often the case in Throne of Liberty, you get weapon experience from a lot of different content. But by far the best way is farming in the open world dungeons. And here you're not dropping any items. You are actually gaining directly experience for your weapon when you're killing monsters in those open world dungeons. And here it's so important to be super efficient. You always want to have 2 buffs running. The first one is from a fruit called Golden Apple Pie. As you can see, it gives you more weapon mastery experience and also more token efficiency. So if you're farming in open world dungeons, you always want that active. You just need level 11 cooking for it, which you can reach super fast. And the ingredients are also nothing special. Sometimes you will also get some alternatives from events, but you really want to always have that running. Now, then on top of that, if you bought a battle pass, it's important that this battle pass has also a shop. And in there you will find something called Mastery Reports. These Mastery Reports give you an extra 30% experience when farming in open world dungeons. We will talk later on about battle passes a little bit more, and I will explain you what you should buy, but these ones are just super important because you can have both buffs active at the same time, which will give you 80% more experience while farming. Definitely something you always want to do if you can. Okay, that's it for Masteries. Now we come to the last vertical progression system that you need to understand, and that's artifacts. I will try to keep this part as short as possible because the system is going to be reworked pretty soon in October. But let me give you the basics. If you open the artifact window, you will be looking at this unbelievable bad UI. But the system itself isn't actually that complicated. You can see you have here these 6 artifact sockets. The 4 in the corners are called Talus Stones. They just give you a lot of extra stats, like for example here, Wild King bonus damage or Magic hit chance. Then the one on the left is called Solar Stone. This one gives you a new active ability. For example, this one here gives us 5k more HP for 10 seconds. You can see the ability icon right next to your Guardian ability. And as you can see, it always has a 2-minute cooldown. So this ability has no cost or whatsoever, so you can use them whenever you want. Okay, and then this stone on the right is called the Lunar Stone. This one gives you a new passive. For example, here we increase our base damage when our HP is below 40%. Now the important thing is that all these artifacts always belong to a specific set. There are in total 8 different sets, and of course each different set comes with a different active and different passive ability. And additionally, these sets give you also different set bonuses. For example, you can see that the 4 Talus Stones in the corners all belong to the Chaos Harbinger set. That's why we are getting plus 100 crit and 9% critical damage. And then our Solar and Lunar Stone belong to the Ancestral Armor set, which gives us 1.5k more HP. Now getting the set combination you want isn't that hard. You will get there pretty fast. The grind really starts when you're trying to find the perfect artifacts, the right set with the right stats on it and with good quality. Because first of all, there are 8 different sets. Then there's a huge pool of possible stats that can be on the artifact. And on top of that, these stats can have different qualities. If there's this star on the stat, it means that the stat rolled at max value. The problem is that there's no way to change the stats on the artifacts or increase their quality, which makes it just a massive grind. But they have acknowledged that the system is pretty bad and they are planning to rework that in October. So yeah, you definitely want the right artifact synergies, but I wouldn't invest too much time into min-maxing the artifacts right now. Okay, but how do you get these artifacts? First of all, you will for sure get something from the Hyperboost servers. But then afterwards, the best way is AoE farming them on Nebula Island, so the PvP island. And the second best way is again by farming in open world dungeons. But to be fair here, Nebula Island is way better. Okay, so when you are farming there, you are getting a lot of those artifact chests. And when you open them, well, that's when the real pain starts, because you will be getting tons of artifacts and you will have to go through them one by one to check if they're an upgrade or not. They recently added also some filter functions here to make it easier, but yeah, it's still super painful. But as mentioned, don't invest too much time into it. It will be reworked soon. But yeah, the most important thing is just making sure you get the right artifact set bonuses. That's it. Now we finally made it. We talked about all the vertical progression systems in the game. I know it's a lot, but after you played the game for a few weeks and rewatched the guide 3 times, you will know how it works. Now we have to talk about the auction house. And here we have to talk about 2 things. First of all, what can you actually sell and buy here? And secondly, how do you always find the cheapest stuff here? First, let's talk about what you can actually sell in the auction house. So as you can see, we have on the top weapons, armor, and accessories. And then in the middle we have the same for lithographs, and in the bottom we have some other items. Okay, so I explained before that we can't just sell every item we drop on the auction house. Usually only items that drop from world bosses can be sold there. Everything else usually can't be sold. So for example, if you drop something in a dungeon, you can't sell it. So if you click on an item, you can always see down here at the bottom this small symbol where it tells you unsellable in the auction house. Okay, what other options do we have then if we can't sell items directly? First of all, we can of course do a trade extraction. So we take the first trade that the item dropped with and extract it. So you just click on the item, click on trade extraction, and for some extraction stones, you get the trade from the item. You can always see that this is a trade extraction and not a full item because of this silver border here. Now let's go back to the auction house. Now here you can see that a lot of the items that are being sold here are actually trade extractions and not the real weapons. Because most items that drop you can't directly sell on the marketplace. So that's what you have on the top here. The items themselves and the trade extractions from them. Now let's talk about lithographs. These are basically recipes to craft items. And the cool thing is you can create out of a lot of items those lithographs. So for example, this stuff we can't sell on the auction house, but what we could do is we create a lithograph out of it. For this we simply click on this little lithograph symbol here, and then for those precious blank lithographs we could create this lithograph out of it. Then we could sell this exact lithograph on the auction house, someone else can buy it and can craft this exact weapon again. So this method is not functioning for every item, but for most of the items in the game. But for creating such a lithograph, you need these precious blank lithograph. So you can always craft them on the respective crafter. So since we are here at the armor crafter, we can craft the lithograph resource for the armor. Most of the resources here are pretty basic, and by now you should know where they come from. The only special one here is the enchanted ink. This is what I told you at the beginning. You should always buy on the contract merchant. This is pretty much the only way how you got those ink every week. So you are pretty limited on those. But if you create those lithographs for like really good items, this can make you a bunch of Lucent. It is really, really powerful. But what's also cool about lithographs, or in general about crafting gear, is that you always have a 20% chance that the item becomes a great success. And that means the craft can always be sold on the auction house. Maybe this is confusing, but let me give you an example. So let's say you drop the sword and shield in a dungeon. You can't sell it, so you create a lithograph out of it. Someone else buys it and then crafts this sword and shield again. If he now gets a great success, then he can sell the item on the auction house directly. And the full item usually sells better on the auction house than just the lithograph. Even though crafting costs are basically irrelevant, you will always have enough resources for all the crafts. And this also means if you want an item, always check first the lithograph. They are usually always cheaper. Okay, so we understood most of the items we can't sell directly on the auction house. But what we can always do is create a trade extraction from the item and sell that then on the auction house, or we create a lithograph out of it. So there are 2 options to sell an item on the auction house if we can't directly sell it. Okay, now how do you always find the cheapest trades for the trading process? Let's go back to our example of the sword and shield that we traded before. To unlock the trait, we need traits from the exact weapon, right? For this, you simply search for the weapon and then you go to the trait extractions, not the full weapon, because they are of course way cheaper, but trait extractions are for the trading process more than enough. And here you can just buy the trait that you actually need. For the enchanting process, we don't care anymore if it's the exact weapon. So for example, let's say we just want to search for a hit trait and we just want the cheapest possible one. For this one, you simply click on the weapon, click here then on trait list, and then you will see these market symbols right next to each trait. Now click on the one for hit chance and it automatically filters the auction house for the weapons with hit chance. Now, then you only need to add one more filter for the tier. So you click on the filter symbol and then I select here Epic 2 because this is an Epic 2 weapon. And now you can see it filters the market for our desired trait, starting with the cheapest one. Super important, you will use this method multiple times. By the way, if you want to sell stuff, just click here on the sell tab, and then you click on the item, and now you just have to decide for how much Lucent you want to sell it. In most cases, I'm always going here for the lowest current available price. Just simply because in most cases, these prices are not going up again. So you always want to get rid of the items as fast as possible. But yeah, I think that's all the basics you need to know about the auction house. Okay, now you know how to sell stuff on the marketplace, but how do you actually make a lot of Lucent there? Should you just turn every item into a trait extraction or a lithograph? No, that's for sure not the best way. Because for trait extractions, you need extraction stones, and for lithographs, you need the ink. And you only get a handful of those every week, so you only want to spend them on items that are actually worth a lot. I obviously can't give you a fixed number here, because market prices will always vary depending on your server or when you are watching this video. Be a little patient, observe the market, and see if it's worth it to sell the item. But of course, if you notice in the middle of the week that you're not dropping many tier 3 items and you could pretty much sell all your tier 3 items with your extraction stones, then do it. Because at the beginning, all the items will go for so much more Lucent. It's totally fine if you use all your extraction stones and also all your ink each week. You actually want to do that because in the first weeks, you will make way more Lucent out of it. But important, just use it on tier 3 items, so epic 3 items. Then, like I already said at the beginning, please make yourself a strategy. Do you want to play the game free to play or not? If yes, then you really need to sell all good items at the beginning, even if you need them. You drop the perfect stuff from a world boss, you sell it in the first weeks. As a complete free-to-play player, you have to do this. Because yeah, maybe you have the weapon then, but it will take forever for you until you get all the other stuff. And often you can just buy that same weapon for 50% less 3 weeks later. That's at least my advice if you want to finish your build in a reasonable time. Then you might ask, what are the best ways to make Sollant? So you probably noticed that you make Sollant pretty much in all content in the game passively. So if you do any contracts, solo dungeons or whatsoever, you always make a little bit of Sollant. Then additionally, you will also make quite a bit of Sollant if you farm in the open world dungeons. So if you kill the elites there, you will always make a bunch of Sollant passively. But yeah, maybe you're doing those things and it's still not enough, which can for sure happen. Then the best way to make easy Sollant is to sell these stones. So you might have noticed that these can be used as an alternative to the different ores that we often use for crafting, right? And yes, for crafting they work exactly the same. But these crystals have 2 advantages. First of all, you can sell them on the auction house. So you can also make a little bit of Lucent with them. But to be honest, nowadays usually we just get so much of the other ore that not a lot of people are buying those anymore. But the second advantage of those is that you can sell those to an NPC. And for those you will get a bunch of Sollant from them. So if you're completely out of Sollant but you need some, just sell those crystals. If you don't have enough, you can always buy them on the auction house. This is by far the easiest way to make a bunch of Sollant, but always keep an eye on those Lucent prices for those crystals. Maybe you can also make some Lucent with them here. Now we have to talk about the Lithograph book. Now we already talked about the different things that you can do with items that you don't have a use for. So we learned before that we can dissolve them so that we get magic powder from it, which we then can use to craft our glowstones. Then we learned that we can put items into the material transmutation system, where we can reroll our items and also get resonance fragments. And now there's one more thing that you can do with items that you don't need. You can put them into the Lithograph book. You can put each item once into this book. If you do that, the item gets destroyed and placed in this book. As you can see, items are always grouped together with multiple other ones. And if you finish the whole group, you get the reward shown on the right side. If an item is worth nothing, it's always a good option to put it into the Lithograph book. But now with the new update, we are getting tier 3 items, and those items will be always something worth. So at the beginning, never put them into the Lithograph book. But if you get older items, like for example Epic 2 items, then you can of course put them into this book. Okay, next up we have Ornate Coins. If you go into the special shop and scroll a little down, you will see that there's a special shop just for that coin. So when we were in tier 2, there was always a lot of good stuff in here. But this will be also probably updated for the new update. So right now it's really hard for me to tell you what you actually have to buy here. It's just important that this shop resets every month. And usually you won't always have enough resources to buy here everything. But yeah, we have to wait and see what we will actually be able to get here. Just don't forget to come here at least once a month and buy all your stuff. Okay, so how do you get those coins? Probably the best and most consistent way to get those coins is through Twitch drops, or whenever we have downtimes, because then Amazon usually sends out a few of them. At the beginning, you can also get a few coins through the collection Codex. So how this one works is, out in the world, you will find hundreds of these small little papers and books here. And if you collect them, then you will often get Ornate Coins as a reward. So you really don't have to focus on farming those coins. You will just always get them passively through different sources. Now you might be asking, is it worth it to buy the Battle Pass, one of the 2 leveling passes, or Davinci's favor? So let's have a quick look on those. Let's start with the leveling pass. To make it short, no. I think especially with the new Hyperboost, there's really not a need to buy one of those leveling passes anymore. They are pretty much outdated. Next, we have the Battle Passes, and here we are getting a lot of them. Sometimes we will even have multiple running at the same time. So like in so many games, you have a normal path and a premium path. And the rewards, especially if you're just starting out, are just really good. You will get skill books, glowstones, and pretty much every material in the game. It's definitely worth to get the premium rewards, especially in the beginning. Now just a few other things you should know about the Battle Pass. First of all, you complete it by doing all these quests here on the side. Pretty straightforward. Now first you will just level the pass, and then after you've finished that, you will get points for the Battle Pass shop. And now let me give you some tips here on things that you always want to buy. First, the dimensional contract tokens 2. And these allow you to do more daily dungeons. It's really good. Especially at the beginning, this means more chances for tier 3 items. Really good. Next, I would always buy the Abyssal Contract Coins, which will let you do more open world dungeon farming, which will just help you to push your masteries even further, which is also just super important at the beginning. And then you always want to have enough mastery reports. You remember, those give us 30% more experience when farming in open world dungeons. Just because of this item alone, the Battle Pass is already worth it. At least you get the Battle Pass once and then you buy a lot of those reports. So every time you go out farming, you always have them ready. It just makes it so much more efficient. And the last thing you always want to grab are unlock stones. You can basically never have enough unlock stones. So yes, the Battle Pass is really good. Now the last premium feature is Davinci's favor. This one just gives us a bunch of quality of life features. More storage space, the ability to accept more contracts, summon all crafters, and the list goes on. There are a lot of useful stuff that just makes your life easier. But one thing that makes it especially powerful, Orion, is that you get the free sync slot for every item slots, which just saves you a ton of resources, especially early on. Just because of that, I would already recommend getting it. So yeah, if you're actively playing the game, I would highly suggest you buying the Battle Pass and also buying Davinci's favor. And here, by the way, you don't have to buy everything on day one. You can make some Lucent by selling stuff on the auction house, and as soon as you have 500 Lucent, you buy Davinci's favor. And once you get the next 500, buy the Battle Pass. Don't feel forced to buy Lucent. You will make enough Lucent just by playing the game. Now, let's have a quick look on the settings. First, let's talk about the graphic settings. What is kind of funny is that most of these settings are actually not doing what they are supposed to do, or they're actually not doing anything at all. I will link you a really good video from Albu Performance in the video description. He goes through all the settings and tells you what they actually do and what his recommendation is. My settings are almost completely based on that. So if you want, you can just copy them. For me, they're working really well. So if you still experience lags or whatever, I highly recommend watching his video and seeing which settings you should turn off to gain the most FPS. Now, one additional thing, you can gain crazy amount of FPS if you play with DLSS frame generation. For some reason, my new graphics card has some problems with it, so I don't use it anymore. But if it works for you, it's really good to gain a lot of FPS. Of course, you will lose some quality, but in some cases, it can even double your FPS. It's crazy how good it is. Okay, now let's talk about the gameplay settings. There are of course a lot of settings. We just talk here about the most important settings that impact your gameplay. And nowadays, most of the settings are actually pretty decent by default. But there are still 3 settings that I would change immediately if I would now reset my settings. So let's go through them. First, let's go to controls. Here I've got a bunch of different attack options and most of them are actually already perfect for me. The only thing that I would definitely activate is toggle aimed skills. This is basically your quick cast for all your abilities you have to aim. So if I press my key, it shows me the area where the ability will land, but as soon as I release the key, it immediately uses it. Otherwise, you would need to click one more time with the mouse. I think that's super annoying. Next, we go to the character tab and then we scroll a little bit down to show character name. Here you can decide if you want to see the HP and the names of friendly players, enemy players, and also from monsters. And here I'm just a really big fan of only seeing HP bars on everyone. I really don't need the names above players or monsters. You can see the difference here in this picture. For me, not having the names just looks way cleaner. So we turn name off everywhere and put health on everywhere. The next thing that I always turn on is show my nameplate. That shows your HP bar above your own head. Not a lot of people like that, but I just love that. Okay, next we go to target. So in the first section, you can set up what happens if you press tab. By default, it just always searches for the next closest target to you, which is at the beginning totally fine. But then really important, below you will see auto target when attacking. This defines who you attack if you don't have anyone selected, or if your target that you have selected is out of range for you. And by default, you won't do anything. If you press down an ability, nothing happens. That's so bad, especially in large scale PvP. I have no clue why this is still the default. Whatever, just activate prioritize nearest target, especially for PvP, but also for PvE, this is just so much better. But yeah, all the other settings aren't game changing. You can go through them if you want, but with these changes, you already have a really solid setup. Another really important tool is the combat settings. This menu lets you save specific setups, so you will probably really fast use different skills, masteries, and later on different gear for PvE and PvP. If you would always have to change all of that manually every time, it would be super annoying. And that's exactly what the system is for. You prepare a setup, and then by clicking one button, you instantly have your PvP or your dungeon setup ready. And don't get confused here, it's super simple. You just select a free preset on the left, then you give it a name, and then in the beginning you really only need the first 4 settings. So you can define your equipment, your skills, and your masteries, and maybe your guardian. All the other settings below aren't that important for you at the start. It's really a system that is not complicated to use, but it will be so unbelievably useful in the late game. Don't be lazy and save your builds always here. Now I have just a few other small tips and a bit of information that might be useful for you that I didn't know where to put. First of all, there's something called blessing pouches. They can be really good because they give you a chance for more items and they will always give you extra weekly contracts. You remember, you only get a set amount of weekly contracts each week from the Sunrise merchant. And with these blessing pouches, you can get even more. You will find them in a lot of different shops, but the most important source for them are actually your daily contracts. So if you're doing your daily contracts and you see them somewhere as a reward, always grab them. So if you want to min-max stuff here, you can also always only take one contract here, then reroll all your contracts, look if there are pouches. If not, take a random contract and reroll again. Again, you look if there are pouches. If not, you just take a random contract and reroll again. So you try to get as many pouches as possible. The next tip is if you go to your inventory, you can actually change the icon size of all your items. You just have to click on the symbol on the top right corner and all your icons getting smaller. I also just recently learned that myself. I think it just gives you a way better overview. Then you can also lock your items so you don't accidentally destroy them. You just click on the item and then you click on this little lock symbol. And the last tip I already mentioned at the beginning when we talked about Amitois, but maybe some people skip that. So let me tell you that again. So if you click on an item or pretty much anything, you will see this how to acquire button. This will always tell you where you get this item from. And this is so helpful, especially in the beginning. If you don't know where you get a resource from, just click on the resource and click on the how to acquire button. And it will tell you where you get the item from. Now the final topic of this guide will be all the stats in the game. If you just started the game, you might come back to this part in maybe 1 or 2 weeks. It can be a little bit too much at the beginning, but as soon as you understood the basics, it's really good to learn how stats actually work. So yeah, let's start. Okay, let's start with our first stat, base damage. Now this stat is always the base of all your skills. It does not matter if it's a healing skill, a damage skill, or a shield skill. When you use an ability, the game rolls between these two values. So between your min damage and your max damage. And then it takes this value to calculate how much damage you do, how much you heal, how much you shield, and so on. So for example, the focused fire bombs deal 510% of your base damage as damage. Since this is always the basis for all of your skills, base damage is just really important. Now let's come to the next stat, attack speed. Attack speed reduces the animation time of all your skills. So let's say you use the skill like serial firebombs. Now attack speed reduces the time it takes you to charge all of those fireballs. The more attack speed you have, the faster you can do the animation. Again, it does not matter what kind of skill it is. It can be an instant skill, it can be a chargeable skill, or whatever. Attack speed reduces the time it takes for your character to perform an attack. So in the end, it means that attack speed allows you to make all of your combos faster. And the system just takes this total attack speed value as reference. The lower this value is, the faster your attack speed will be. Next we have range. Most people think that range only impacts the range on which you can use your skills. And that's of course also correct, but it does even more. So if you hold on your skills, you often see that distance stat. This stat is being influenced by your range. So for range abilities like Judgment Lightning or melee abilities like the Guillotine, you can simply be further away from your target. It's not only for range abilities, it's also for melee abilities. But now there are also skills like Devastating Tornado, which also has a distance value. But here this value is increasing the radius of the ability, so it's increasing the AoE effect. This is of course an exception. For most abilities, it's just impacting how far you can be away from your target. Just keep in mind that if you have the distance value on your ability, you can impact it with your range. Okay, so next we have two stats that are weapon specific. Firstly, we have the shield block chance, which only the sword and shield have. So shield block chance is the best defensive stat in the game. Every time you get hit with an SNS in your hand, you have a chance to block 40% of the incoming damage. So say someone hits you with 1000 damage, then you have a chance to reduce it to 600 damage. But the important thing to remember is that you need to have your SNS in your hand at the moment when you get hit. Let's say for some reason you use Devastating Tornado in a PvP fight. This is a great sword skill which you have in this moment in your primary hand, which means your sword and shield is not in your hand at that moment. And that means you cannot block any attacks with the shield block chance. That's why it's so important to have your sword and shield always in your primary hand. So when you are, for example, not using any skill, you still have your shield block chance active. Because this is the main reason why tanks are so tanky. But you can also counter this stat with shield block penetration chance. Every point of pierce chance you have reduces your opponent's block chance. It's pretty straightforward. Okay, so the second weapon specific stat is offhand weapon chance. This one is only relevant for crossbow and daggers. It gives you a chance that skills you use will be used a second time. So for example, say you use brutal incision. Normally you would see 1 damage number because you would only attack with the dagger in your right hand. But when the offhand weapon chance procs, you will see 2 damage numbers because you will perform the ability once with your right dagger and once with your left dagger. And this is of course a really powerful stat for those 2 weapons. Okay, so before we get into all the other stats, you will often see that stats are broken down into the 3 main different attack types: melee, magic and ranged. Greatsword, sword and shield, spear and dagger are your melee weapons. All the abilities from those weapons fall into melee attack types. It does not matter if it's a stun or a ranged ability or whatsoever. All abilities from those weapons fall into the melee category. On the other hand, wand and staff are your only magic weapons, and range comes only from the crossbow and the bow. These are the basics you need to understand, of course. Okay, then let's move on to the next stat, which is defense. This one is pretty straightforward. It's just a percentage reduction of all incoming damage. For example, 1700 melee defense is about 40% damage reduction on all melee attacks. So if a greatsword would deal 1000 damage on an attack, you would reduce it to 600 damage. So the more defense you get, the more damage reduction you get. But as so often the case in Throne of Liberty, there are diminishing returns. Next we have hit chance and evasion. When we look at one of these stats, we always have to look also at the other one. For these stats I have to go a little bit more into the details, because I really want you to understand this. So how does it work? Evasion allows you to completely avoid an attack from your opponent. Not just the damage, but also any form of CC, debuff or effect that comes with the ability. But there's also something called hit. And if your enemy has a lot of hit, then he increases his chance to hit the skill. So let's say you have 600 evasion and your enemy has 500 hit. Then he reduces your evasion with his hit. That means against this target you have only 100 evasion. I don't want to go here too much into the details, but here's just one thing you need to understand. And that's if your enemy has more hit than you have evasion, your evasion is completely useless. Let's say your enemy has 700 hit now, and you still have only 600 evasion. Then all your evasion is completely non-existent. This is something you need to understand. If you want to build evasion, you really need to understand how much hit all the other builds have. Because otherwise it might be the case that you're just wasting your stats. If you don't want to think about that, I totally get it. But then don't play evasion, just go endurance. So what is endurance? If we want to understand endurance, we also have to look on critical hit chance. Let's start with crit. Of course, the more crit chance you have, the higher the chance for you to crit. But what does crit even mean? Okay, so at the beginning, when we talked about base damage, I said that when you use an ability, the game rolls between your min and your max damage, which then defines your base damage of your ability, right? Now you have to understand, if you crit, you no longer roll between those two values. You always use the maximum damage as a base. This would be now used to calculate the damage of my skill. But if I crit, I also have a crit multiplier. So in my case, I have an extra 40% crit damage on top of that. So first of all, the game takes the max damage to calculate the bases. And then we have always this critical damage factor on top of that. Okay, so we understood crit. But now it's important to understand that your enemy can reduce your crit chance with endurance. It's the same as evasion and hit. If you have 600 crit and your opponent has 500 endurance, then you have only 100 crit chance against that guy. One more important thing is that if your opponent has more endurance than you have crit, you can no longer crit this target. For example, if you have 600 crit, but your enemy has 700 endurance, you can't crit anymore. This almost didn't happen in tier 1, but will for sure happen a lot in tier 2. So the good part about endurance compared to evasion is, even if you just have a little bit of endurance, you always reduce the chance of your enemy to crit you. So if you're unsure about certain thresholds and you just want to have something useful, then just go endurance. There's also a stat called critical damage resistance, which reduces the damage from crits you take. It's just the counterpart to critical damage. Critical damage increases the damage of critical hits, and critical damage resistance decreases the damage of those critical hits. Okay, so the next stat is heavy attack chance. This gives you a chance to double your damage. Let's say you use Judgment Lightning. If it hits heavy, then you will always see a purple number, and at the end of the number you see a ×2. It just simply doubles your damage. It's obviously really powerful. There's also the stat Heavy Attack Evasion, which just counters those attacks. So it works similar to Hit and Evasion and Crit and Endurance. Next we have Skill Damage Resistance and Skill Damage Boost. Both straightforward. Skill Damage Boost increases the damage of all of your skills and also increases your heals. And Skill Damage Resistance reduces the damage of your enemy abilities. Both super strong on every class. You always want to stack that. There are of course diminishing returns for the stat, but there's almost no way to stack too much Skill Damage Resistance or Skill Damage Boost. Now we have bonus damage and damage reduction. This is often misunderstood. So how does it work? I have here 60 bonus damage. Now every damage number you are creating is called a hit. And on each of those hits you add these 60 bonus damage. So for example, the guillotine from the Greatsword shows only one damage number, so it's also one hit. So my 60 bonus damage are only added once. But if I use Quickfire from the crossbow for example, I have 4 damage numbers, so these are 4 individual hits. All these 4 hits get 60 bonus damage on top. So you get the point. If you do a lot of hits, then bonus damage is really good. So if you see a lot of damage numbers, if you don't have a crossbow in your hand, there's probably always a better stat that you could go for. And damage reduction works the other way around. So it's good against people who attack a lot, but not so good against people who hit really hard. Also important here, bonus damage and also damage reduction are not influencing dots. Okay, let's come to the next stat, buff duration. So buff duration increases all the buffs that you use. For example, victory energy or enchanting time. These buffs will be simply longer on you. The important thing is that there are no diminishing returns. So if you have 55% buff duration, your buffs will also last 55% longer. If you have a lot of buffs, this can be really nice and strong, and you can stack as much as you want. Debuff duration on the other hand reduces any negative effects your opponent applies on you. So for example, a debuff like a healing reduction effect, or even a stun from a greatsword, or even poison from a dagger. All of these negative effects will have a reduced duration on you. This is also for every class really powerful. But this one comes with diminishing returns. The more you stack, the less you get out of it. So these were the most important stats in the game that you just need to understand. Okay, so on the next tab we don't have to talk about all these stats. Most of them are pretty straightforward. But a few of those are still really interesting. So mana cost efficiency is something you might not have in other games. It reduces the amount of mana required to use your skills, and this by a percentage value. But of course this skill also has diminishing returns. The next stat is cooldown speed, which of course reduces the cooldown of all your abilities. Of course, a really powerful stat, but again, just keep in mind that it has also strong diminishing returns. If you hover over the stat, you can always see the actual cooldown reduction of the skill. So I have here 28% cooldown speed, but I only reduce my cooldowns by around 22%. Cooldown speed is a fantastic stat, but just keep in mind that there are heavy diminishing returns. The last stat on this page that is a little bit interesting is percentage bonus healing. So of course it just increases your total healing power. So the amount you heal with your abilities for example. But also similar as to buff duration, this one has no diminishing returns. So I have here 66% bonus healing. That means I actually heal 66% more. So for all the healers out there, there is no way you can build too much bonus healing. And this counts for all of the healing stats here. Okay, about all the other stats we either talked already or are just simply straightforward. This brings us to the next page, which is all about CC skills. So we have here our chances and we have our resistances. What you need to understand here is that there are 8 different types of CC abilities. All CC skills fall into one of these categories. You can find the type of the skill always in the skill description. For example, Strategic Rush is a collision ability and Stunning Blow is a stun ability. But what are these chances and resistances doing? So if we look again onto our Strategic Rush example, we can see that it has a 70% chance to push an enemy. So collision chance increases now the chance for you to push your enemy. And collision resistance reduces the chance of your enemy to push you. So either this 70% chance increases or decreases. Again, of course, it takes here the difference between your chance and your enemy resistance. If your resistance is higher, you decrease the chance. And if the chance is higher, then you increase your chance. That's it. All of the other stats on the other pages just follow the same rules that we talked about. This side is just specific for different monster types, this one for bosses, and this one for PvP. But all of these stats follow the same rules we just talked about. And the last tab is also pretty straightforward, it's just non-combat stuff. Now the last stats we have to talk about that are also really important are the base stats. So in Throne of Liberty we have Strength, Dexterity, Wisdom, Perception and Fortitude. Important to understand is that Strength, for example, is not directly linked to Greatsword players. Strength can be also really valuable on mages. This is because all these base stats always influence your base damage, but they influence your base damage differently. Strength, Perception and Fortitude influences the min and the max damage, and Wisdom and Dex only influences the max damage. But in general, if you have a lot of base stats, you will increase heavily your base damage, which makes you deal more damage and heal more. But additionally, all these base stats influence all the stats we have just talked about. So Strength focuses on defensive stats like max HP and resistances. Dexterity focuses on crits, attack speed and evasion. Wisdom focuses on max mana, mana regeneration and cooldown speed. Perception gives you all form of hit chance, CC chance and also buff duration. And Fortitude gives you again endurance and resistances. So all these stats we've just talked about will be influenced by those base stats. Generally, having a lot of base stats is always good, but spending them correctly completely depends on your build. Whew. Okay guys, that's it. We actually made it through all the topics. And I gotta say, this guide was crazy. It was by far the biggest project I've ever done. I don't even know how many hours I spent scripting and editing this video. It was something else. So I really hope this guide was at least helpful for some of you. If you enjoyed the content and want to support me, then hit this like and subscribe button. And if things are still unclear, like I mentioned, just ask me in the comments or catch me live on Twitch. Thanks for watching and see ya in the next one.